She walks it loud like a thunderstorm, debunking myths with style and form. True crime, conspiracies her game. Melissa Jade, remember her name. She's loud, feisty, spilling tea, diving deep into mystery, breaking down your wildest claims. Melissa Jade, she's got no shame. Microphone fierce like a roaring lion, unveiling secrets people been hiding. True crime queen of the digital scene, Melissa's got you hooked on her screen. She's loud, feisty, spilling tea, diving deep into mystery, breaking down your wildest claims. Melissa Jade, she's got no shame. Murders to cover-ups, nothing misses. Melissa's here to share her guesses. She's got theories big and bold, no stone unturned, no case cold. She's loud, feisty, spilling tea, diving deep into mystery, breaking down your wildest claims. Melissa Jade, she's got no shame. Melissa Jade, she's got no shame. Melissa Jade, she's got no shame. From murders to cover-ups, nothing misses. Melissa's here to share her guesses. She's got theories big and bold, no stone unturned, no case cold. She's loud, feisty, spilling tea, diving deep into mystery, breaking down your wildest claims. Melissa Jade, she's got no shame. 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 She's loud, feisty, spilling tea, diving deep into mystery, breaking down your wildest claims. Melissa Jade, she's got no shame.
Hello, everybody. Hey, FOS. Yes, I do, but it's my theme song, so it doesn't count. Hey, J7. Hey, Kimberly, Solo Angel Mom, Claudia Moonchild, Truth Exposed, J Faw, LG. Hey, LG. Bogart, Alicia, Misbehaving. Hey, Tiffany, J1, Vicky, Daniel, Poor Linda, Shiggles, Vanessa M. Hello, Shabane.
Hello.
Hi, Kristen Lee, Vanessa, Just G, Kelly, Justin, Andy. Andy says, so looking forward to this live. Yo. Hey, CB. Hi, Harlot. There is so much. Oh my goodness, there is so much, even now currently more coming out. We're going to be packed with content regarding Idaho 4 for these next few streams at minimum, because we're going to be going through every little bit, because I don't want to skip over anything. Shay waited, we didn't peak. We know very minimal about this transcript that was released, and I'm so excited. I can't tell you how excited I am.
Me too. I'm so excited. Hey, everybody. Thank you. I won't be in chat, but I'll watch it a little bit.
Okay, so basically, all right, let me start with doing our missing child. So our missing child segment for today, we have Kamaya Renee Smith. Kamaya, look at those lips, Shay. Oh my god.
Those cheeks. Oh
I
gosh.
know. So Kamaya, we have pulled Kamaya up before, but Kamaya has been missing since December 6, 2024 out of Memphis, Tennessee. It doesn't specify how many months she is. Unfortunately, it only goes by years. So she is 0 years old, and it makes a big difference between 3 months and 9 months. She looks very tiny in this photo. But it says Michaela and Kamaya may still be in the local area, Michaela has a tattoo on her right arm, and Michaela's hair may be styled in colored braids. So this is Memphis, Tennessee, and here is Michaela Sierra Smith, also missing since December 6, 2024, out of Memphis, Tennessee. She is 17 years old. I believe she may be the bio mom, but because she also is a child, it's going to be an associated child, I believe, because that's what makes the most sense to me. They're both minors, and so I think they go in as associated childs. But I'm pretty sure Michaela is mom, and so if you or anyone you know has information on their whereabouts, please contact the Memphis Police Department at 1-901-545-2677.
Oh,
Hey, Andy. Okay, so you wanna kind of give people what, like, so we've been going over, kind of going back, and let's go through everything so you're completely up to date. Since the first two streams, so much has happened. So if you guys haven't been following and kind of just been going with our coverage, you will remember that we've been referencing a court hearing that took place a couple of weeks ago. And half of that court hearing was sealed. Well, we now have the transcript unsealed, and we are going to be going through, it's 175 pages. We may not get through all of it today. We may have to break that up into two streams, but I am not skipping over any of it. We're going to go through every effing line because there is so much within it, and it's extremely important. And then you want to explain what else we have?
sure. So after we do this, okay, so before this transcript was released, the Frank's motion court ruling came out as denied, and then the transcript posted to the docket. So for those that have, been consuming or reading themselves, they may have gone in the opposite order. So I'm excited to do it this way. What I'm able to understand is there's a lot of little nuggets in the details, especially with the non-dissemination order that's in place. And, we've been living off of a PCA and
Yep.
whatever little bit we can pick up, here and there. So I'm really looking forward to hearing this. And I just want to hear all the info. Then today they started today the most the state has already started filing with the motions in limine, so we're prepping for that part of the trial. And also another huge update that happened this week, or this last end of last week, was Ann Taylor submitted a request for the defense to bring in Bika Barlow, she was actually in the court hearing, this last one. She was like sitting right behind the counsel. I saw her, and she was one of their expert witnesses, and she specializes in dealing with, as a lawyer with like legal, DNA forensics out of California. She's very well known, a high sought out expert, like in media as well, to get to talk to her. So by doing that, they've actually have taken Jay Logston, who is the male that has been part of the hearings thus far, standing beside Anne and their colleague. He's actually just going to be of a co-counsel, so he will not be at the bench. So Bika will be replacing Jay. So that is something huge to me. And we can read through those later. That tells me that Ann's accepted the Frank's motion being denied, and they're getting ready for motions in limine. So they have a great lawyer added, and I love to see good lawyers doing their lawyering jobs. And I'm excited.
This is going, like, I saw Harlot say before, we need more than one night a week for Idaho. And I was like, literally 20 minutes ago, I said the same thing to Shay. And trust and believe it's going to pick up. But there is so much. Anybody who was around back when this case took place, like you become very emotionally invested. And like Shay said, we've only had basically this PCA to go off of for so long. And just that's why I'm like, I'm not willing to skip any line in this, because every little piece adds to the puzzle, and to get some answers and to get some clarification and figure out what's going on. But it just, I'm so eager to see this trial, and having good lawyers on both sides make all of the difference. Everybody deserves a good fight. And if the evidence is there, the evidence is there. You don't have anything to worry about. But this is, I could feel it in my bones, Shay. Like, this is going to be a great defense and prosecution.
I 100% agree. I'm so looking forward to it. Hey, Whoopi. I think that at this point, it's like, everything that I've like gone through thus far has been just like redaction, redaction, redaction.
Yes.
And what I've been told about like the transcript, just reading kind of high level, like little bits and Reddit, has been, people have said that it skips a lot, because if you think about like if we were to actually watch this play out, we would get to see for example, Anne have a strategy where she may
Yes.
like start on one topic and then switch to another, to try to get the answers that she needs. That's part of defense strategy, as well as prosecution. They do that. And so I'm told, like, reading the documents, like, it's really good to like take your time and go through it, because we're not really getting to visualize it. We're gonna have to like follow that. So it's gonna be a little bit of a bouncing ball, but I'm here for it.
Mm-hmm. And yes, I did see poor Linda say, did you hear that Stacey Chapin spoken out? And it seems, Shay's the one who told me about it, that because originally they were not going. Okay, so here's the hard part. You have 4 families, and to find even one family where everybody agrees within it, it's rare. Okay. So now you have 4 families, and this is what makes this so incredibly stressful, because even following true crime, we don't see quadruple homicides that often that aren't in like a mass casualty setting, like just specifically for homicides. And the problem is that they're linked, the victims are linked together. And what happens, and we saw this a lot, and we're going to be getting into this stuff kind of like more after we go through all of these transcripts and stuff. But what we saw with the Idaho case is there were, families that handled the situation one way, and then there were other families that handled it a completely different way. But it could absolutely get to the point where there were concerning things coming out, like alleged grand jury leaks to the families and things like that, to where, could you even imagine being in a situation where this is your child? Every family, this is your child, right? And you may handle it one way, but then another family may handle it completely different. But you have to have that concern that, could something another family is doing interfere with my family's justice? And when I say that, I'm not pointing the fingers or judging any of the family members, versus I can imagine this is a very difficult thing, because not often do we see that. Usually, of course, there are times where there's more than one victim, but this is we have 4 vibrant, youthful, beautiful young adults. I call them kids, but they're young adults, and they're all linked together. And this case became very messy. I could kind of compare it to like what's going on with Sebastian Rogers and his disappearance right now, but it was misinformation central. Families on social media can be dangerous, and again, I'm not judging them for it, versus we see people on social media are opportunistic, and they don't always have the best intentions. And then you have the families who I really don't judge them, because I could not imagine, nor do I want to imagine being in that situation. But when it plays out over the internet, it could be very messy very quickly. And I couldn't imagine being linked to where not only do you have to figure out within your own family, how do we want to move forward with this, but then you have to worry about so many other families and being all, it's like a ripple effect, like any action you make ripples outward.
Yeah, and I think the way like Stacy explained it, and I think it resonated like most, was that they all want to be a voice for their children, their loved ones, and they all have their own beliefs too. Because we got to remember, guys, the death penalty is on the table right now. It's death penalty eligible, and they may have different views on that, and that's okay. And so it is. I think it is a very different road to navigate, and respect for one another. I mean, but we didn't even hear from Maddie's mom until this summer that she came out and did her interview. I believe it was with Good Morning America. And that's whenever like they debuted the foundation that they were doing and the girl's name, because Ethan has his, and they're all going to be around, or both foundations are focused around scholarship funding, and so I think that that's really great. But like everyone operates differently. I think I've always been one to watch Stacy a lot. I
Yeah.
just think there's something about her that I find interesting, classy, all of them in their own way, but just I don't know. She's just different. And I'm also like a huge CrimeCon fan, and so I was listening to the live that Joseph Scott Morgan was doing there. It was like 2 years ago, and that she was there and walked in and like spoke up, and like the whole crowd was just speechless. I don't know if the chat remembers that. I mean, there was like a few little excerpts that were like on TV, but like, I mean, this was still at the point where like the Chapin family, pretty, much for the most part, they were doing interviews with local media. Being from Washington, I actually find a lot of their stuff like on like the stuff that they are interviewed on, like on Seattle stations, or channels. And so, until they wrote the book for Ethan, the Little Boy in Blue, and then his foundation, did we start seeing the Chapin family even come out to the public. So they're all really interesting. And I'd love to know more about, Xana's sister and dad, because we saw them for the first time
Yeah.
on 48 hours. I mean, it's been a wild, interesting ride, and all the families deserve justice. And also just please to like keep in mind as we go through these, like not just the victims' families. I also do think about Brian's family, and
Yeah.
this is not their, there's they're going to
They're
support
innocent
the
in
woman.
this. They're innocent in this as far as we know. So
Yeah,
they're not accountable the same way we're not accountable for what any one of our family members have done. You're accountable for yourself, and it brings on, and we've spoken about this often regarding Wade Wilson, regarding Letitia Stout, BTK, right? Like it's the convicted or the accused family members that really don't get a light shine on them often, and the trials and tribulations they go through, the issues that they face, but I can't imagine it being easy at all.
yeah. I mean, I don't know if it was ever confirmed officially, but I know that there were talks at the beginning. If you do you remember hearing about Brian's, like he has two sisters, that they lost
Yes.
their jobs at the height of him being a suspect and being arrested. Like, I mean, these are women who are older. He was the youngest, and like their lives are changed too, and having to be there for their parents in their 60s. And I can't imagine. I think about like, if I were ever in this role, like what my mom would do, like it would be nuts.
Absolutely. And so for anybody who doesn't know, you may have come to these live streams going in kind of blind to it. The Chapin family is Ethan's family, which is all the way to the left. He is the one male victim. He was the boyfriend to Xana, who is on our far right. You have Maddie here, and you have Kaylee. And so originally, Ethan's family believed that they may not go to trial, they may not attend trial, but more recently, they have spoken out and considered that they may. And
Do you want
I
that
believe
interview?
what?
Do you want to play that little part, like 2 minute clip of the
Yeah.
interview?
Hold on.
'Cause-
I believe, in my opinion, I believe it's because of the judge change that they may have changed their stance on whether or not they attend. What do you think?
The Chapin family?
Yeah.
I think that in my opinion, as they have gone probably through their grieving process, I would speculate that they may be at a place where they may be more capable, like, and feeling they can be there in their own way. And I don't know if that just took a while for them to navigate, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know if it has to do with the judge, but that's just kind of how I felt about it.
Yeah.
Okay, let me grab that for you.
I have it. No, I have
you
it.
do?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, sorry.
So this is, you're fine. So this is just a 2-minute clip, and we will play it. And so this just came out. Let me see what the date was. 3 days ago. And so let's just take a quick look.
And the Goncalves have done a few interviews. They're out in the open a lot. And I haven't really grabbed any of theirs. I have definitely watched them, but I just don't have any. Oh, just me. Well, hello, everybody.
Sorry, my thing got weird.
That was going to be the show.
No, sorry. Okay. So here, it's just a quick 2-minute clip. And so let's take a listen before we go through this transcript.
After an Idaho judge denied motions to exclude key evidence in the trial for Bryan Kohberger, we're now hearing from the mother of one of the victims.
Yeah, Kohberger is charged in the brutal deaths of 4 University of Idaho students. And this afternoon, Fox 13 Shira Matsuzawa spoke with one of the victims' moms.
Sitting down with Ethan Chapin's mom, Stacy. She says they're blessed to have had 20 years with him. But they're
and also please remember, Ethan was a triplet. He was a triplet.
Constantly finding a way to move forward.
It's always kind of right at the forefront, you know. So you have to learn to live with that.
Ethan, along with Xana Kernodle, Madison Mogen, and Kaylee Goncalves were stabbed to death in an off-campus home in November of 2022. Just last month, attorneys for Bryan Kohberger, the man accused of killing the 4 University of Idaho students, filed motions asking the court to throw out key DNA evidence in this case. This week, Judge Stephen Hippler denied those motions.
How could you not? Let's be honest. How could a judge not allow DNA? I mean, he basically said it in one of his hearings. He said, you know, it's admissible every day and twice on Sundays. I mean, and that's how we, it would have been, I mean, you would have had to have fought tooth and nail if somebody didn't allow the DNA in it. That's crazy.
The ruling bringing the case one step closer to the trial scheduled to begin this summer. A trial the Chapin family has been adamant about not attending in the past.
I just feel this impending storm that's coming. We are, you know, reconsidering, you know, whether or not we'll go. That is a very difficult thing to think about. But, you know, if we have to go, I don't know who else can represent Ethan other than his family.
Until then, Stacy's focus is on Ethan's siblings, who are set to graduate this May. As a triplet, Ethan would have been alongside them. His legacy now helping others get an education. The family started the foundation, which has since awarded $55,000 in scholarships to 35 kids, all in Ethan's name. Shira Matsuzawa, Fox 13 News.
So it's very moving to watch that. And part of me is happy that they had some time to process and figure out how do they want to go about this. But at the same time, I'm aware that time in this circumstance is so brutal, and you can't even process or grieve or start to have closure when you're stuck in this constant state of limbo, you know? So part of me is like, okay, I'm glad that she and the family has a little bit of moment to let's think about this. But at the same time, it's got to be unbearable.
Yeah, and I just I will say too that, hey, Nika B, good to see you, girl. And I do agree, she's very much more vocal now. I think again, I think she definitely got her voice being going through that grief, process. And I mentioned that CrimeCon event. And part of her interviews, one thing is that she was introduced to the Petito family and other families who have lost children like she has and her husband.
Yeah.
So I think just getting a support to maybe like just different lens and having, people around you, the time, everything, like people find their own way to navigate it. And also, the families and friends of the victims and students, I know that they listen to YouTube, to podcasts, to everything. So just always a reminder to be kind and just remember that.
Absolutely. So okay, where we're starting with today, we are in no rush. Like, and when I say that, I don't want to give a recap of the transcripts. I want to go over every word, every line. I don't want to miss a beat. And so we're going to read through this transcript. Obviously, if there's just like whatever nonsense lines, like that, we could skip over that. But we're gonna start, and like Shay said, we're gonna go in the order that makes the most sense. So we have the denial of the Franks hearing, but that makes most sense to go over next after the transcripts, because there's a lot of information within that. And this is what the transcript is from a few weeks ago when they had that court hearing. And we referenced it in the last two live streams. The first recap, we actually were like, oh my God, like, I know we're going back to the beginning with the PCA, but at the same time, we just had that court hearing and there was so much that came out of it. That court hearing, half of it was sealed. It was not televised. We did not have cameras rolling, nothing. So we don't know what happened. Now we have unredacted transcript of it, so we could read exactly what took place in that court room when we weren't able to see ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And so yeah, I noticed that like during when like listening to the hearings from a couple weeks ago, Judge Hippler would kind of make like comments to either side, like these are things we talked about in the closed part of the hearing, and then they came to an agreement that they would release the transcript, but both the state and the defense had to submit redactions, so that's why it came later.
Mm-hmm.
And the redactions, I'm going to tell you, like I know already, are going to be one of the witnesses' names, DM Dylan. I mean, we've always said Dylan. I don't think we have to censor that, and I'm respectful of all of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, Shaker Fist Smith. So, please take a second, hit the thumbs up if you already haven't. Let's keep things classy, not trashy. All opinions are welcome as long as you communicate them respectfully. The only thing I'd like for people to do, is you can lean one way or the other. But at the end of the day, we do not have all of the information. We do not have all of the facts. That's why when we have things released like this, it's so monumental. This is black and white. This is what we actually know to be true. And I enjoy going through it. And speculation is fine, but let's try to speculate based on facts, not speculate based on speculation, because that's when it gets very far out there, in my opinion. And so just please be respectful and mindful of all comments. Not that I don't think you guys would be, but like we said back in the day when we were doing active coverage of the case, things got very crazy very quickly, and it does bring out the crazies. And I don't anticipate to see too many of them now as we're kind of gearing back into it, because there's been kind of a break. But as we get closer and closer to trial, I know it's going to just take off all over again. And so I just want to set the pace now as we move forward.
And for a few people that were asking in chat, and so back. Okay, so apparently, I think it was like in September-ish, they had made in August, they made the decision to move the trial from Ada County And it's in Boise, which is actually where they did the Daybell trial. And it is a lot bigger, like of a courtroom and area, so that's where they're doing it. But it also, John Judge requested that he be taken off
He wanted off.
but he apparently had already had plans to retire in September, and this is kind of where it went. It's just
Yeah.
interesting the way that it did. It's like, well, if you had those plans then and you
Yep.
already had these concerns, why did it take us so long? So there were some families that kind of like felt like some type of way,
Yeah.
but regardless, the vibe was that like John Judge seemed to be like is interested in like the back and forth of the legal argument where Judge Hippler is very rigor in his schedule and staying, to the case and being able to, what I've seen, rule timely. And that's a good thing. Ruling timely is helpful. It keeps things moving.
And sorry, Harley, I'm not understanding your comment. It didn't take two people to kill Nicole Simpson and Ron Goldman, but there have been plenty of cases where one person has killed multiple people. So I'm just a bit confused by your comment. Sorry.
Didn't they have like a stabbing like not too long ago where one person like was stabbed, had 18 victims in like
Yeah.
less than like, I don't know, 10 minutes or something, 20 minutes? It was wild.
Yeah.
Not all were succumbed to their injuries, but yeah, I mean,
No,
it's fast.
absolutely. Listen, like I understand like people have issues with the timeline, but it's absolutely possible. But I think I was just thrown off from your opening statement of it took two people to kill Nicole Simpson and Ron Goldman, because it didn't. But okay. Yes, Tess says, I always go back to the Apple River incident and look how much damage he did so quickly. I think people need to accept the type of weapon we're dealing with here. It's a K-bar style knife. It is meant to do maximum damage. And you're dealing with vulnerable victims in the middle of the night, intoxicated. So just let's take a step back. Let's just leave the room for the evidence to present itself. So here we are starting this transcript, and we're going to read it. And this is the transcript of the redacted proceedings before the Honorable Stephen Hippler that happened on January 23rd, 2025 at 9 a.m. We heard the second half. We did not hear this part. And I've heard one thing regarding this, regarding the dog. And other than that, I have not been tainted. I have not watched anyone's coverage on it because I don't want to go in with anybody else's thoughts in my mind. Me and Shay were just talking about this. I don't want to hear anyone else's coverage, everyone else's breakdown, because I want my opinions and responses and reactions to the information to be organic. And that's what we're going to do today. And I'm really excited.
Well, even like whenever, can you hear me okay? Sorry,
Yeah.
I had to change out my headphones. But even when we were talking earlier, like I told you, these documents like dropped like Friday, and like there's not many creators that I've seen that have really covered them fully. They did recaps.
Yeah,
But a lot of people already did the Frank's motion, and I really want to see the transcript first. Like that's just me.
Trust me, like I want to jump and start to look through all of it. Tell me what's in it. But I'd rather go in order. That's why I'm like, we're not in a rush. Like we're going to get through this. I would think over the next 2-3 streams, like not this transcript, like I mean everything, but we have also more coming out just on the docket today we see. So I'd rather take the time and really get into this and make sure we don't miss a damn thing.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So I guess we'll kind of just alternate the reading. So we have defense witnesses, Detective Brett Payne, which anybody knows who has followed this. We have Brett Payne point of view in the Idaho PCA, and there's a lot of people who have had major issues with Brett Payne, and I can't tell you any solid reason why other than just a bunch of conspiracies. That doesn't mean that there isn't any validity into certain parts of like an issue versus like he's a major character that people have an issue with.
Mm-hmm.
Then we all
let's see, if you want, like at home, like, or wherever you are, you feel free to take a screenshot of this, because I believe we're just going to see last names. It'll just go back and forth. It won't say if they're if they're defense or if they're prosecution. I think it's
Right.
going to be just, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. And I'm so sorry, I forgot to verbally say thank you, Hope. We are the True Crime DMC, LOL. Thank you so much. And thank you, FOS, who says, so off topic, but does anyone know what happened to the people that froze to death outside someone's house for chat if MJ can't respond? Are you talking about the guys?
I do. I
Yeah.
remember I heard a follow up, the Kansas City Chiefs fans, the guys.
Yes.
So apparently the homeowner, I know what I would, what I remember going back over, because I did look it up a few times, was that he did like a rehab treatment. He wasn't being charged with anything, but they are
Right.
charging other individuals
Mm-hmm.
who had, like, pretty much OD, gave them the stuff that OD'd. So the homeowner wasn't being charged. So the last I saw, and think that was a couple months ago, I got an update on
Yeah,
that.
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, that was sad.
It was very sad circumstances. But okay, so go ahead.
Oh, so yeah, just like if y'all want to take a little screenshot of this or write it down, or we can just kind of make sure we notate like which one is which, because they're going to go back and forth if you're not familiar with their last names. I actually got something to write with at first before.
That was smart, and I'm getting that out myself right now.
I got my little journal.
Okay, so we have defense witness Detective Brett Payne.
And everybody knows who he is, I guess. I hope.
I wrote Betty Payne. I'm like trying to speed through it so quickly. I wrote Betty Payne. Then we have Rylene Nolan. That name I'm not familiar.
Yeah, they will have her listed out. She, I think, is the manager of the lab, of the Idaho lab.
Okay. Then we have Matthew Gamet, Daniel Helwig, and Leo Larkin. I remember Leo Larkin.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So we have closed proceedings. The court. Do you want to start? You can read the court.
Sure. All right. The court, which will be
sorry.
Ready?
Yep.
Which will be Judge Hickler. So let's go on record and State v. Kohberger, CR 01-24-31665. Present in the courtroom today are the defendant with counsel, Ms. Taylor, and Ms. Masseth. Is Mr. Logston here?
Yes, Mr. Logston is here, Your Honor.
For the state, we have Mr. Thompson, Mr. Nye, and Ms. Jennings.
Yes, Your Honor.
We have a number of people in the courtroom. Are they all part of counsel team or witnesses that are to be called today?
Both, Your Honor.
Outside of those two categories, that's everybody?
Everybody here is a consultant or witness. I'm not quite sure who's on the prosecutor side.
Mr. Thompson, Ms. Allen is from the Attorney General's office, and Ms. Workman is from our victim witness coordinator.
Okay.
The court. All right. Before we get going this morning, I understand the first portion of today's hearing will be put on evidence related to the IGG suppression and Frank's issue. In terms of witnesses, what are we doing in terms of excluding and or exceptions to exclude based on experts?
So just a little pause. Defense at this point is trying heavily to get that DNA that is left on that knife sheath that was left at the crime scene thrown out, okay? And thank you, Hannah Neal, for a month. Happy to make it to this live. I missed the last because my spawn I know, with each other currently I hope that she feels better soon, and I'm so happy that you're able to be here too. There's so much, I'm so excited for this. Sorry, I really am.
Me too.
So Ann Taylor, Your Honor, the parties have stipulated that the witnesses may be inside the courtroom for the entirety of the proceeding. The state has their witnesses. That's a remote witness, and that's fine for that person to listen in.
The court. So that person is appearing remotely?
Mr. Nye. Yes, Your Honor, that's correct.
The court. Do we have them up?
They are not connected.
They are not connected. Did you give them a link? Did you ask for a link? He's kind of smart ass, so I'm going with that.
Yeah, they let us know they received the link, but we're okay getting started, Your Honor. He doesn't need to be here.
I was told by my law clerk that defense intends to refer to exhibits that they don't have copies here today for the court.
Ms. Taylor. Your Honor, there was a stipulation that all of the exhibits that were attached to the IGG motion and the Franks motion would be admitted. I'm happy to give the court my copies. That was about 1,000 pages worth of stuff, so I did not print and haul down an extra copy, but I'm happy to give the court my copy if the court wants a hard copy.
Okay, pause real quick, just so you know. This is important as a little excerpt, is that in the when they first filed the Franks motion, the judge rejected it because he was like, you got to point out to the exhibits. You can't assume that I'm going to know what you're pointing to. And then they had to resubmit everything the defense did. So that's kind of the vibe. Like the defense is showing up to court, and what, ideally you would have, several copies. And there's only one copy. So but we're already starting this off.
We're already starting this off poor. And so we'll refer to it's the court, but it's Hippler. We'll just say Hippler and Taylor. They're the main ones who are going to be speaking at this point. So you got Hippler,
which is me. I've got a copy in the file. The only problem is trying to find what you're talking about quickly if you're referring to a distinct item within that. Typically, I'm provided copies of the specific exhibit witnesses go over. I'll do my best, but...
So again, that's a problem. The defense is coming in and you don't have a hard copy for the court to go over of the exhibits, and then you're talking about over 1,000 pages. When you're referring to something, Hippler's expected to find within 1,000 pages of a hard copy the exact, it's a lot. So Taylor says, I'm happy to provide the court my copy or use the Elmo so the court can see the display.
All right. We'll do what we can. In the future, if you know what exhibits you're going to be talking about in particular, you should have 2 copies available for the court.
I will, Your Honor.
Anything to take up before we get started?
Mr. Nye, no, Your Honor. I don't believe so. Taylor, I don't believe so either. Thank you.
All right. The defense may call its first witness.
And Taylor. Your Honor, the defense would call Brett Payne.
Just to make sure, we're not live, right, Sandra?
Sandra says, do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is truth, nothing but the truth? You could do Brett Payne.
Okay. Well, it keeps glitching for me. I don't know why.
Oh, no.
It'll pop up. So if I pause for a minute, it's just kind of doing a flicker. I think it's StreamYard. Okay, so Detective Corporal Payne, I do.
May I approach the podium, Your Honor?
Yes, please.
So then we have Detective Corporal Brett Payne, which, we're going to try to do these readings so where it makes sense to be consistent. I'll consistently be Ann Taylor. So now we're going to hear Brett Payne. Shay's going to take Brett Payne, just to make sure you guys are following who is who right now. So we have a direct examination. Detective Brett Payne, who again, it was his point of view in the PCA of Idaho, the Idaho PC. Well, wait, he's Idaho, not Pennsylvania, right? Yeah.
Idaho.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, so he wrote that his affidavit was included in Pennsylvania and Idaho's, and then it was Blaker's that was for his affidavit or Exhibit A, whatever it was on Washington's.
Okay, so Brett Payne, Detective Brett Payne, for anyone that doesn't know, it's within the PCA. It's his perspective, what he found going to the crime scene originally. So he's one of the main detectives on this case. So we have him as the defense witness, direct examination. Ann Taylor, good morning.
Good morning, ma'am.
Will you state your full name, please?
Brett Payne.
How is your last name spelled?
Payne.
What do you do for a living?
I'm the detective corporal at Moscow PD currently.
How long have you been at the Moscow Police Department?
Almost 7 years now.
Prior to the Moscow Police Department, did you have law enforcement experience?
Yes, ma'am.
And what was that?
I was in the military police corps, the U.S. Army, for 3 years prior to coming to Moscow PD.
Are you post-certified?
Yes, ma'am.
In the course of your responsibilities with Moscow Police, were you handling an investigation involving homicides at 1122 King Road?
Yes, ma'am.
And what was your role?
I was assigned lead detective after about the first 24 hours in the case.
And does that mean that you have responsibility for the case and the evidence?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. As such, did you participate in a search for a suspect?
Yes, ma'am.
And when was the first time you heard Bryan Kohberger's name?
The first time I heard Bryan Kohberger's name was December 19th, 2022.
And what was the result of?
That was a result of investigative genetic genealogy that was being undertaken by the FBI. We had a phone call that evening and we were told Bryan Kohberger's name.
Okay, sorry, 1 second. I'm just making a banner for anybody who may be coming in late. This is a transcript. This is a reading of the transcript from January 23rd?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I can check. Sorry. Also, just a really quick side note for chat. There's a lot of talk at the beginning that Brett Payne was a very rookie lead detective, and I think it's interesting to note, like in here, it took 24 hours for them to decide a lead detective. Isn't that crazy? The
Yeah.
transcript was January 23rd. Yeah.
Okay. And just real quick before we continue, does this style of reading work for everyone? Because it works best for me to hear it played out like this, as if like we're hearing the audio. So I just want to make sure it works for everyone and everyone's able to digest the information well. Is this good?
And to confirm, no audio or video has been released. It's just the transcript. So it's either you guys read it or you can listen to us.
Right. So, all right, good. Awesome. Thank you. So, and before that, Ann Taylor, okay? This is between Ann Taylor and Brett Payne. And before that, Mr. Kohberger was not on your radar?
No, ma'am.
So, Ann Taylor, this has been a big issue since Bryan Kohberger has been arrested. Defense is trying to figure out, but how did you come to Bryan Kohberger? Because you have to remember that the IGG, right? You going through the back door, the FBI going through the back door and using that DNA at the crime scene and putting it in an ancestry website and then finding basically family members, whoever submitted their DNA to, like, let's say ancestry.com. Bryan Kohberger's aunt, let's say, submitted their DNA. So they're able to tie, hey, this DNA at this crime scene connected to this person, this aunt. They don't know it's an aunt at that point, but then they make their way inwards. That is what Ann has been focusing on. But then the prosecution is saying, we're not submitting that. Yes, FBI went about that, and that's how they may have come to Bryan Kohberger. That's not how we've come to Bryan Kohberger. So if we're not even presenting it as evidence against the defendant, why are we even discussing it? That's, so she wants to get into great detail about how did you guys get to Bryan Kohberger if you're arguing that it's not through the IGG or you're not using it through the IGG. And that's a big question we've all had. So before December 19th, was the FBI CAS team collocated with you?
Oh, hold on 1 second. I had to run to grab a drink. I tried to tell you back chat. I didn't want to interrupt you.
No, you're fine. Oh, I didn't see that. Sorry, I didn't see the badge.
No, it's my fault. I was like, crap.
Oh,
No.
Okay.
I would also say too, though, is the date has been such a speculation too,
Yes.
because the state is saying that the FBI says it's just a tip. We didn't say it was this person. We're saying like you should check into them.
Right. So this is, definitely a avenue of questioning we all need clarity with.
And it's been a fight, no matter if you have a side or not, which I don't really think there should be sides. There should just be justice and truth. But this has been a very highly discussed topic. Oh, hold on 1 second. Sorry, my little one just came. Let me see what she needs.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, MK. Hey, Thistle. Thank you all so much for being here with us. Please take a second and hit that thumbs up. We're doing a reading of the previously sealed transcript that just got unsealed, and I'm so excited to see what's in this. I'm so excited.
Okay. I'm so
we have
sorry.
defense doing direct examination of their first witness, Detective Brett Payne.
Okay.
So how long had he... No, you're fine. How long had he been collocated with you?
I don't remember exactly, but it had been several weeks at that point.
And was that Nicholas Balance?
Yes, ma'am.
What other FBI team members were collocated with you?
Goodness, a lot. We had technical assistant Maria Tyndall, S.A. Jacobson, and numerous other FBI special agents that were there to assist.
And by the time it was December 19th and you first heard of Bryan Kohberger's name, had you reviewed videotapes?
Yes, ma'am.
How many hours of videotapes do you think you reviewed?
I don't remember a lot. I can't give you an accurate representation.
In those videotapes, did you focus in on any particular ones that were of interest to you?
Yes, ma'am. In particular would be the... are you talking about addresses that were... How would you like me to refer to them?
How you nicknamed the cameras.
So the first one was from 1112 King Road. It was a surveillance camera, an exterior surveillance camera on a house that was immediately to the northeast of 1122 King Road. There was some footage from a Linda Lane camera. I forgot the address off the top of my head. There was footage from A&W, which is at the corner of Louder and South Main, or Highway 95. There was footage from an address on Indian Hills. There was also footage from a Ridge Road camera. And that's how we referred to them, was basically by those names.
Linda Lane. Interesting. With those... Go ahead.
I was say, and if you guys have not seen Brett Payne talk, he just seems like a very, like, I don't know how to explain, like a former military, like Midwest, like proper manners, very calm personality guy. He's not like super, excited in his mannerisms.
Right.
Like he's really kind of thinking. Yeah.
So, Ann Taylor, with those references in mind and keeping December 19th in mind, which of those cameras were your focus before you learned of Bryan Kohberger's name?
I would say all of them were important before that.
And it was later that other cameras became important? Is that right?
Those were the main ones we relied upon for vehicles. In particular, is what those ones were.
I'm going to return to that in just a minute, but I want to talk to you about interviews. Did you interview any people in relation to the case before December 19th?
Yes, ma'am.
And did other officers interview people?
Yes, ma'am.
And were some of those people the roommates of the people at 1122 King?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you review other officers' work as well?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you have regular meetings with other officers about the status of the investigation?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you have any role in deciding to pursue investigative genetic genealogy?
Yes, ma'am.
So again,
was-
that IgG is. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't.
You're fine.
I didn't. Sorry, but that IgG is using that FBI backdoor method, according to the defense, of getting the DNA submitted through these ancestry sites. So go ahead. I'm sorry I interrupted you.
You're okay. No, I mean, you're right. I mean, frankly, I think that they had a lot of evidence. It would have taken them longer to get to him, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. And hi, Miss Smoking Bread.
Alrighty. So, me, Brett Payne. Yes, ma'am. It was a collaborative decision amongst the command team to go that route. But yes, I was a part of that.
Were you part of the discussions during the process of the identification?
Yes, ma'am.
And were you aware that Othram Laboratories began the work on the investigative genetic genealogy?
Yes, ma'am.
What kinds of information did you receive from Othram Laboratories?
I don't remember what was received from Othram directly. I knew they were conducting their specific type of work. I don't remember exactly what they provided to us.
Did you receive some documents from them?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Do you know how many documents you received from them?
I do not.
Was it one time or more than one time?
I don't remember.
Were you part of the discussion to take the work from Othram and go to the FBI?
Yes, ma'am.
Why was that decision made?
From my understanding, granted, this is my first encounter with investigative genetic genealogy. So, again, as a collaborative discussion, we decided that because the Idaho State Police Lab and Othram had essentially had decided because the Idaho State Police Lab and Othram had essentially exhausted their resources, this is how I understood it, that we would move to the FBI because they had more resources available to pursue this particular avenue.
Do you know what more resources the FBI had?
The only thing I'm privy to was that they had more databases that they could compare the sample to. That was the extent of my knowledge.
Do you have familiarity with the databases and the rules that apply to those?
No, ma'am.
I'll save those questions. What was your communications with the FBI about the IgG?
So our communications were just via telephone. This sample was sent to the FBI. I don't remember the date it was given over to them, but after that, there was very few conversations. And if they happened at all, they were just telephonic, advising us that the process was still in the works and they would let us know when or if they had anything of interest for us.
Do you know what files or documents went to the FBI from Othram?
I do not remember.
Did you receive documents from the FBI?
In relation to IgG?
Yeah.
I believe after the fact, after we received Kohberger's name, we did receive documents, but I don't remember what they were.
Thank you, MK. Please make sure you thank MK if you got a membership. Welcome to our new members. So that's interesting that he said after. I believe after we received Kohberger's name, we received documents. That's interesting to me. I think I'm going to write that down.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's a big difference.
Yeah, and that like Othram had reached their limit of what they could do because they had to, they could only work with, what in their parameters as
Yeah.
a public company. And then believe later on we'll find out more that FBI has policies before they could step in, they had to exhaust some database research.
Yeah.
But that is interesting. And the telephonic thing, I would definitely write down the telephonic, because is there recordings of the telephonic conversation?
Yeah.
Sorry, we're sidebarring here. It's the little things,
Well,
guys.
no, yeah, that's what I want to. That's why I'm not in any rush. I want to discuss as we go, especially for anybody who may not have followed to understand, like, well, hey, how is that relevant? So I'm trying to keep that in mind too.
Right.
So, do you know how many documents related to IGG you received from the FBI?
No, ma'am. I believe as part of discovery, it was in the thousands of pages, but that's, let me scroll down. The best of my knowledge.
Thank you for that. All right. So once you have Mr. Kohberger identified, what's your understanding of what that meant to have his name?
Just in relation to the overall investigation, is that.
Yes.
So the only thing that was given to us was Bryan Kohberger's name. That was it. It was conveyed to us by the FBI that it was to be taken as no more than a tip. That was it. So once we received his name, we set about doing basically an independent verification of whether or not he was involved in this crime.
I'm going to talk to you about that a little bit more. But do you know why the FBI connected Bryan Kohberger to the case?
So December 20th, if memory serves, we had a secondary meeting with the FBI via Teams. If memory serves, and they simply walked us through. So does it, okay. So Teams is, do you know what Teams is?
Mm.
So when people don't know, we used it at my prior company I worked for, but it's Microsoft Teams. It's like a Zoom kind of platform, but it's like the Microsoft version, so they can do like video conferences and things like that.
Oh,
So
interesting.
it's a way to like, and you can like set up the meetings through like Outlook and like attach like a Teams link, and people can click and join.
Okay. And thank you so much, Sun Beach Holly, for 2 months of support. I appreciate you both so much for reading this to us. I could read, but I don't feel like it. So I love this. Thank you, ladies. Thanks, Holly. Okay.
Okay, so if so December 20th, if memory serves, we had a secondary meeting with the FBI via Teams. If if memory serves, and they simply walked us through the family tree, how they did that. Now, I don't remember the details of all that. It was an in-depth conversation that, to be honest, is above my head. But they essentially worked their way through the family tree and arrived at a conclusion that Bryan Kohberger was a person we should look into as a tip. That's the extent of my knowledge of how they did that.
Thank you, Anton, for the super sticker. That's very kind. Thank you so much. Thank you all so much for being here, guys. Hey, and Clumpy, Kimmy C, Renee, April. Thanks, guys. So, how was Bryan Kohberger, the name you received as a tip, linked to the case?
He wasn't until after December 19th.
What item of evidence did they link Bryan Kohberger to?
I'm not sure what you're asking. As far as before December 19th, is that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
We didn't have one at that point.
Why did you become interested in learning the identity of Bryan Kohberger?
Not quite sure I understand your question. We were interested in anyone who would have been involved in this. The DNA from the knife sheath was obviously the one thing we had that we thought was a very strong piece of evidence in this case. So it was that particular piece that we pursued as a potential avenue of identifying a suspect.
Is it your understanding that the FBI's work said that it was Bryan Kohberger's DNA on the sheath?
hold on, sorry, it kind of glitched out for me. That is not my understanding.
What is your understanding?
My understanding is that the FBI concluded that Bryan Kohberger was a possible source of DNA that we should look into. They did not, to my knowledge, at any point say Bryan Kohberger's DNA is on the knife sheath. That was never conveyed to me.
So
That's
on December
interesting.
20th, so go ahead.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. So they're saying that the FBI never said it was Bryan Kohberger versus it was a tip. And we've heard the tip. Look into Bryan Kohberger as a possible source of DNA.
So December 20th was the team's meeting, right? Or was that the
Well, no, December 19th is, where did the teams go?
I think it was up a little bit.
On December 20th, then what happened? Yeah, we already started looking into him from the previous evening. So that day, December 20th, we began going to be. Oh,
this is new.
Crap. Oh, shit. Then I didn't go up high enough. Okay, where'd the teams? Okay, so December 20th, if memory serves, we had a secondary meeting with the FBI via Teams, and they walked through the family tree.
Okay, but if they did the family tree, sorry, I'm thinking through this timeline right now. So interesting.
How was Bryan Kohberger the name is linked to the case? He wasn't until after September 19th. Okay.
But then the way he answers that last question that we just went over, then why were y'all going over the family tree? That is interesting.
So my understanding is that the FBI concluded that Bryan Kohberger was a possible source of DNA that we should look into. They did not, to my knowledge, at any point say Bryan Kohberger's DNA is on the knife sheet. All right. On December 20th, when that happened, when he's somebody you should look into, what did you do?
We had already started looking into him from the previous evening. So that day, December 20th, we began going through basically our sort of standard investigative procedures that we had been doing throughout the investigation for various leads, to include basic DMV searches, NCIC offline returns, NCIC searches. We have a database called TLO, which is a credit-based search we use to find basic information. So we started doing all those things, looking for information on Mr. Kohberger.
And what you found is that he didn't have a criminal history. Is that right?
Correct.
So talk to me about going to Pennsylvania for the trash pull.
Well, I was not in Pennsylvania for the trash pull.
I'll ask somebody else that later. All right. So after you received Bryan Kohberger's name, and he hasn't been on your radar at all before, is that right?
Correct.
All right. So you had pursued interviews and surveillance video. Had you pursued evidence found inside the scene at 1122 King?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, hold on. Let me pause. Thank you, Jessica. MJ, you have just the right amount of sass that Ms. Taylor has when speaking. I'm trying to read it as I imagine she's saying it. And again, and Brett, and like Shay said, Brett is more laid back and doesn't have too much personality. Like I would say, like, and he's trained too. And he just kind of seems like a very kind of mellow, low, you know. And it is kind of like pulling a little bit of teeth with it. And so thank you so much, Jessica. So what efforts did you make to pursue unknown male B? So pause real quick. You want to explain what unknown male B is?
Yeah. So there were a couple of unknown male DNA, or unknown DNA that they had not tested for. It has been brought up way back when, and at the time of the grand jury, at the time, like the warrants and everything were like issued, um, they weren't able to like, drill down further. Now, what we didn't know at the time was for unknown male B, where exactly that came from. It it wasn't really stated. We knew that there was like a glove that was outside where blood was found, which it'll easily identify that more. But hearing that there were other unknown DNA, like it shouldn't be a surprise. It's a big, home. Allegedly, like they had like a little block party the night before with some of the other houses that were nearby. There was like, I don't know, 100 plus people reportedly in and out. There's been many people live in this home before this. Like it was like girls living in this home. There was like guys that used to that were former fraternity. Like they've been interviewed on media as describing like the acoustics in the house before. So I mean, you could imagine there's just DNA everywhere. But one of the things that I think was just interesting is the way like this was brought up was not really identifying like where this was located, because if it's located in a spot that's not like relevant to the crime, then and say at this point there's just one perpetrator, they're going to focus on the most viable piece of evidence, and that had been the knife sheath, which was
Yes.
next to Maddie, and that would have been their best lead to drill into, and then still work to figure out like if they can identify it. Now they'll go through all of the stuff in here, I'm sure, but that's been something lingering over people. Like a lot of people had speculation that what if there was multiple people involved in this crime, because it is hard for a lot of people to grasp the concept of the timing with the amount of energy it took to kill 4 people. And I mean, it was a lot.
Hmm. And there were other sources of DNA that they were able to link, but it's this unknown male source. Okay, fair enough. But at the same time, I would expect there to be a lot of DNA in that house. It depends on what type of DNA.
Right. And it was the fact that, like, why this one source? And now we're finding out what it is. It's
Mm-hmm.
because he's about to answer it. So we finally know.
Yeah. All right. So here, let's go back a second. What
Okay.
efforts did you make to pursue unknown male B?
You have to be more specific. I don't remember exactly where unknown male B came from.
If I told you that the lab report showed unknown male B came from a blood spot on the handrail going between the second and the first floor, does that help jog your memory?
Yes, ma'am.
Pause. Which second and first? Because the first and second floor, technically, that handrail, as far as we know, wasn't used. So which first and second floor are they talking about?
So I think she's being a little tricky here. And I
Yeah.
actually think it was smart that he asked this question, because guys, you got to realize like they don't have whoever is, up on the bench at this time. This is like pre-trial hearings. They don't have all these documents in front of them, but he's having her put it on the court record, like where this
Yeah.
was located, I think is great. So thank you, Brett Payne, for that. But also, like, why would you put second and first floor? Like, wouldn't you typically put what the the ascending, like, you know what I mean? It would go first to
Well,
second.
and that's what I'm saying, Hartlet. It was a little tricky there because this house layout, there are 2 ground floors, but the staircase of relevance that we know the killer for sure took is technically between the second and third floor. Okay. So when she says the second and first floor, as far as we know, the killer never took that path of travel, never was even on the first floor, technically. So this is really interesting.
And I think for consistency, because I do hear like people try to kind of throw that in to skew it. We do know that it's a weird house the way it's built into the hill, and it has technically could be like have two first floors to some people, but
Yeah.
the way the court documents have read all along is identifying the home as a 3-story home. first, second, third. So the bottom floor is the first. They're not calling the floor, which is the second floor, like backs up in the hill, as the first floor.
I could show you guys.
Oh, well,
Crap,
you have a
I need to
diagram?
get that. I need to get that virtual layout again. Hold on.
Well, no, you know, somebody actually asked in the comments if we could show the stack up. Remember this, how they had the stack up of the home as a layout, then us walking through it too. Let me grab that. So right now, what we're finding from this is that according to, you know, what we know, he never went down on the first floor, so there shouldn't it wouldn't be like a crime scene impact area. And how old is the blood? I mean, I have so many questions.
Real quick, I think she is playing a play, and the fact that she said second to third floor versus, I'm sorry, second to first floor versus first to second, little things like that, you immediately go, you know, the second floor is of relevance. This would be first to second floor. Okay, here is the front of the house with the front door. As far as we know, this is where Bethany was, one of the surviving roommates. The killer was never on this floor. So the handrail going from the second to first floor, that's this handrail. And as far as we know, would not be relevant. But this staircase, this one doesn't want me. This staircase would be the staircase of relevance here. This handrail. So I don't know, and I hope they give a little bit more clarification on this.
I agree too. And I just texted you one. I think there's another better 3D one I could find, but that shows the stacking of the home too. Because everybody sees things different. Like, I like the 3D stuff too, but some people want to see it 2D plain filled, you know?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So here is looking at, because this house is very confusing. Again, there's 2 ground floors. So you have the first floor. No victims were found on this first floor. You have there's 2 bedrooms on each floor. You have the bathroom, you have the hall, you have the stairs going up to the second floor next to that front door. This would be the staircase from the second to first floor. Here is the second floor, which is also a ground floor from the back patio. This is Dylan's room. This is Xana's room. Xana and Ethan were found in bedroom D. This is the staircase of relevance here that we know the killer took the path of travel and would have entered in through this sliding glass door through the back. The third floor, again, 2 bedrooms. Bedroom E would have been Maddie's bedroom where her and Kaylee were found. Bedroom F was previously Kaylee's bedroom. It still had her stuff in it, but she wasn't actively living there. So this is a play of words, in my opinion. And she methodically said second to first floor instead of first to second floor. Like, you would automatically say first to second, you know, like the stairwell going first to, you know, the first floor to second floor. She did the second floor to first floor.
And you got that other one I just sent you too? Sorry. I don't know if you, I mean, it's just a different, it's like a little different, but it's got the stack up too. I like seeing them all. You don't have to show it. I just
got it.
Options. I got that one on the Daily Mail after they did the demolition. I don't know. I mean, if you never went on the first floor, I mean, is that blood like that significant, you know? And it was only one spot?
Right. So you have the first floor, second floor, third floor. The suspect arrives on King Road in Moscow, Idaho at 3:29 a.m. The killer quietly breaks into the house just before 4 a.m. He gets into Xana Kernodle's bedroom. The murderer
This is their theory.
Oh, this is their theory. The murderer stabbed Xana and her boyfriend Ethan to death in her bed. He then snuck up to the third floor. Killer then knifed Kaylee and Maddie to death in Mogen's bed. Surviving housemate Dylan says masked man walks past her. She says the killer slipped out the back sliding glass door and fled around 4:25 a.m. Okay, I don't want to confuse anyone who isn't fully aware of like the actual facts as we know it yet, by like the theories. So, you know, just never mind that if you're someone who isn't fully up to date with everything. But this
That
is the
bottom
first
stair.
floor, second floor, third floor. First and second floor are ground level. So
That
this
little
is very
staircase.
interesting.
Yeah, that little staircase right there, like at the
Yeah, the
bottom.
little staircase. Oh, whoa. Little
Oh, hey.
staircase here would be the staircase from the second to third floor. So blood
No, first to
on
second.
second to first floor.
I think you said second.
Oh, I'm sorry.
See,
The second to first floor, which blood on that handrail, how like you guys, this was a party house, like college party house. I need to know how much blood are we talking about? You know, like the fact that if you luminol or blue star it and a little marking comes up, that wouldn't surprise me. When I'm saying that, I'm not, that's just my opinion, because I've said this long before I even knew it was blood on a handrail, that if you go through anyone's house, little markings of blood illuminating is not going to be unusual. Think about how often you could get a cut. Think about college campus, what we've done, you know, like back in that day. Like, so especially if it would be on a hand with a handrail,
there would be more blood. There would
Yeah.
be more blood. Like if somebody cut themselves, or say, okay, say it can't be identified like as Brian. Say somebody has the theory that there was more than one person, and they think this is, you know, a conspirator or whatever. Then the question is like, where's the other blood? You know, like why is there only that one spot?
Right. This is interesting to me, and I'm sure it's going to cause a bunch of I could already feel it now. Okay. So if I told you the lab report showed unknown male B came from a blood spot on the handrail going between the second and the first floor, does that help jog your memory?
Yes, ma'am.
Why did you not pursue that person?
At that point in time, we had already received Mr. Kohberger's name. And from what my understanding was, entering another DNA profile into CODIS would remove the previous one we had from the knife sheath. So if memory serves, the discussion was, we'll hold off. We'll stay with the one from the knife sheath. If we need to, we can address the unknown male B at a later time. So,
I want to make sure. Go ahead.
I think it's important also really quickly to state this too. If it's somebody that's unknown, remember that like this whole portion that they are having as the closed hearing that we got this transcript on has to do with the IGG portion of the Franks hearing. And the Franks hearing, that's whenever there are gross misconduct of like LE and processes that led to a not a credible like search warrant on the defendant, and they're looking to basically throw out evidence, and it's like the fruit of the poisonous tree and anything that it touches. And so what in their mind the defense is the IGG is that. So here we're talking about Brian. So unknown male B, even though it's there, it really has no effect on Brian's affidavit specifically.
Right.
And I think that is also getting kind of lost in the sauce. That would, if there was another co-conspirator, there would be a separate, affidavit and like search for that person, and we wouldn't expect to see Brian like IGG stuff and all that in there. You know what I mean?
And I do agree, like with Harlot, that piqued my interest too. Like, oh, hey, you could only submit one thing into CODIS or else it'll switch over. But what I thought to myself is, okay, I'm not super familiar with CODIS. And maybe when you submit something into CODIS, it has to attach to something, right? Because if you're submitting into CODIS, you're going without a name, you're going with DNA. And so I guess if they have Brian's name linked to it, if they submit another DNA, it's going to link to that knife sheath, but they know that that isn't from the knife sheath. So they would have had to take it from the railing and submit it in.
It would have been two. Yeah.
So
it would skew it. It would skew it for sure.
Right. And Taylor, I want to make sure I understand your testimony. Were you not aware of unknown male B until after December 19th when you knew Mr. Bryan Kohberger's name?
No, ma'am. I was aware of that before. Yes.
How about unknown male D?
Again, you're going to have to be more specific.
If I told you unknown male D came from a lab report from a sample of blood on some gloves outside the house, does that refresh your memory?
Yes, ma'am, it does.
1 second, I'm writing this down. Sample of blood on gloves outside house. 19.
And
Okay.
I'm wondering, was this the gloves that
The infamous glove.
Chris
McDonough.
found? Yeah. And I mean, I don't know. Interesting, huh?
So again, even if guys like DNA being found, little blood specks being found elsewhere, does not negate the fact that Bryan Kohberger's DNA is on that sheath. And when I say that, again, I'm not trying to say, oh, it's 100% just Bryan. No, I'm just saying it doesn't negate the fact that Bryan's was there, okay? So
yeah, we're here for Bryan, and she's like going through all the other stuff. It's just kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm. So you're aware of that too?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So I want to back up and talk about the affidavits. I think you told me in a prior hearing that you were the person that wrote Exhibit A, or the affidavit in support of the search warrants, when it came to looking for things about Bryan Kohberger. Do I understand that right?
Yes, ma'am.
And that affidavit, when you began, was that on about December 23rd to get records?
As far as when I started writing the affidavit, is that what you're referring to?
The first search warrant that applied to Bryan Kohberger.
I believe it was December 23rd. Yes.
When did you begin writing that affidavit?
I began writing that affidavit long before that. It had been a running affidavit because at the beginning of it, there's the walkthrough of the crime scene. There's numerous things. It was a living document, so we just add information to it. I'd say that document started, I don't know, couldn't couldn't give an exact date, a couple weeks prior to that, even before we knew Mr. Kohberger's name.
Help
So
me
that's
understand.
interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I like how they did that, though. At least they started like, writing things out, instead of just
Yeah.
like living in a little log.
Well, because they had the evidence, they had the crime scene, they had the interviews, they just didn't have the person yet.
Right.
So Ann Taylor says, help me understand what parts were added after you knew Mr. Kohberger's name.
Well, to walk down the line best I can. So obviously there's the initial component, which is the crime scene, the testimony from the roommates. Then after that, it shifts to, I believe the first mention of, or the first component was that Bryan Kohberger was pulled over by Corporal Duke on a traffic stop. He was also contacted by WSU police. His vehicle was ran by WSU PD officers. Then after that, we included trying to walk down through the thing without it in front of me. Then we included the vehicle information that was about the white Elantra. And after that, we included his residence and that he had hit LPRs, which is license plate readers, or his vehicle had been seen on LPRs between Moscow or Pullman, excuse me, and Pennsylvania. And then there was the component about where he lived in Pennsylvania.
Let's get back to that time before you started adding the traffic stop. That affidavit contains some information that you gained from other officers. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And you didn't write large parts of that affidavit. Is that also right?
I took a lot of language from experts and other officers and agents. That's correct.
Are you aware your affidavit, your living document, was claimed by other people as their own original document, not giving you credit, but claimed as their own? Are you aware of that?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you aware that you probably know because Nicholas Balance was collocated with you? Did the two of you continually work on language to satisfy what the prosecutor wanted to see for probable cause?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you and Nicholas Balance produce a map to show a possible route of travel for your suspect?
Yes, ma'am.
And Your Honor, I am at defendant's 1A. I can either put it up here or approach the court with the map.
All right, I'm going to switch from Detective Brett Payne to the court. Court is Judge Steve Hippler. Can I see what you're referring to? There's been a lot of Exhibit A's in this case.
That's still him.
Oh, sorry. Just as housekeeping, you had mentioned you stipulated to the admission of sounds like a large chunk of records. 1,000 pages?
Yes, Your Honor. It's the stack of exhibits that came behind the amended Franks motion from the defense.
Okay. And you want me to search through that to find stuff that you want me to rely on?
I don't. I'm happy to give you my copy.
No, I don't mean that. As you know, I entered an order in this case that I'm not going to scour the record to find things that support your claims in this
Oh,
case. You have to cite them in particularity. And so I get concerned when I'm told I'm going to get a large document to be admitted that doesn't sound like it's going to be the focus of the actual hearing or much of it.
oh, that is, you want
Mic
me
drop.
to do the work and look for you. No, that's not how it works. Well, Your Honor, I do have quite a few more questions for this detective. I'm trying to be mindful of my role here with him as far as Franks and his work and IGG. But when it's time for me to argue Franks, what I plan to do was argue from the exhibits, identify them for the court, and hand the court my copy. So I don't expect the court to thumb through all the D1s, D2s. I just didn't bring another 1,000 pages with me.
I understand. My concern wasn't so much what I had in front of me as actual paper. My concern is littering the record with things that are not referred to.
Oh, sorry. This is, yes. It's sorry. I don't mean to interrupt you, but yes, I really like Judge Hippler because the point is that Anne keeps arguing, and I won't say that it's not relevant things, but at the end of the day, the trial is going to be what the prosecution focuses as evidence against Bryan Kohberger. Anne keeps focusing on things, which I don't blame her, but she keeps focusing on things that are not going to be presented as evidence against Bryan Kohberger.
Yeah, I mean, she's bringing up things that I think are kind of sidelined to that IGG, just to get some record in there. It's interesting.
Yep.
But he's pretty snarky. I like him. Okay.
I like it.
All right. Let's do this again. Let's just do that. So I understand. My concern wasn't so much what I had in front of me as actual. Sorry. Did I do that right? Yeah.
Yeah, you're fine.
Actual paper. My concern is littering the record with things that are not referred to. If you're going to refer to specific documents in there, that's fine. But don't expect me to go looking at things you don't refer to necessarily.
Amen. So you can't just slap it and not say, hey, on page 2, exhibit A, at this specific line, like you have to show me, not expect me to go looking for it. So
Yeah.
Ann Taylor says, oh, I absolutely understand that, Your Honor. Those were all put in so that counsel would be advised.
The fact that I admit this group of documents does not mean that it is something that can be relied on, absent you actually using it.
Oh my God. Absolutely. I understand that, Your Honor. I don't expect the court to read my mind. Thank you for that. So now she turns back to Detective Payne.
So pause. Now I totally understand. By the time we got to see like this,
Yep.
the open hearing pop up, like he was just very curt with her. Like, oh, this is crazy.
So
Okay.
Anne goes, Detective, I'm going to attempt to put this map up here. Is that the map you and Nicholas Balance came up with to help with probable cause?
And why are we bringing up the map? I'm sorry. I'm just okay. It's IGG right now. Anyways, yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I'm going to leave that there for just a minute, and I'm going to ask you some other questions. I want to back up to the part of the first affidavit. This is asking for AT&T records. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am. And I just want to say too, like if you're not following, and I hope you are, but there was 2 days of hearings. And this one right here, the Judge Stephen Hippler specifically, they had like open closed like hearings. And even on this closed part, like right here, the reason why they did the IGG as closed is because there are people mentioned in here that are, you know, their DNA, they their name shouldn't be like out in the public and on the record, So from my understanding, even if the families attended, the victims' families, or if Brian's did, like they weren't allowed to sit in. This is just like the court and Brian and the attorneys. So
Mhm.
it's interesting, like, you know, she knew this was just for IGG, and there were other motions that were specific to that tied, like you said, the poisonous tree that went with this, that she could have argued in open. So I don't
Mhm.
know, this is just kind of weird.
Well, and to sidebar for a second, that's funny that you mentioned Delphi, Nancy, because me and Shay were just talking about that, and she was telling me about Court TV releasing um, a really good episode, and we were talking about doing a stream on that to break it down and discuss what was in it. So that was interesting.
And so much has happened like with
Yeah,
Delphi, and it keeps popping. So yeah, every case is unique. I try not, like,
yeah.
I'm always for justice, and justice comes when you have the right person and the proper legal, process in place.
So Anne says, and this AT&T record, is that the first set 48 hours of AT&T records?
Yes, ma'am, I believe so.
And you guys have to remember that was the first warrant they got of Brian's. And are these AT&T records related to a phone Mr. Kohberger had?
Yes, ma'am.
Nobody should be 100% Nika. That's something I strongly believe. You could lean one way or the other. That's fair. But everyone does, But no one should be 100% so until you have all. How can anyone be 100% if you don't have all the information?
I mean, just example, like I saw in case, like, say he thinks Richard's innocent. I think Richard's factually innocent personally, but when he first got arrested, I mean, obviously you're like, oh my God, they got the guy. And then when all the information starts coming out, like you're, as you find, as the facts are provided, like you should be evolving, your judgment. Like that's just my opinion on
Mm-hmm.
it. So I'm just as excited to see this. Like, do I think that Brian is the person? I mean, right now he's most probable based on the PCA and what we see,
Agreed.
but we'll
Yeah.
see.
Like it could come. I genuinely I'm leaning towards Brian as the person. But if tomorrow it comes out, there's a bunch of evidence that we weren't privy to, because we're not privy to all this information yet, and it leans towards him not, or someone else, I'm going to go with where the evidence leads. That's why I got so excited when it's like, we got transcripts, because I want to know where the evidence shows.
Yes, and so many people have like speculated how, in what order were things done and found
Yeah.
out, and when was it piecemealed, and like meaning like it's easy after the fact. And it, okay, I'm just gonna say this based on when they were able to get the so when they were able to like have probable cause to arrest Brian, everything else kind of ties together in that story from like we find out about like his license plate, not being there because Pennsylvania doesn't require it. But like, if the videos don't show that well, then maybe at that piece of time back when they're reviewing all the videos, this is just speculation. I don't know what they have fully. um that may have just been a moot point about, maybe this person comes from a state that doesn't have that. It could have been somebody, hiding it. So we just never really know until you're kind of at the end of it. And I think the way like Anne kind of, you know, attacks it is like she's saying it's not just this little story. You know what I mean?
Right.
But the story is what everybody wants. They want to know the end, and my brain wants to know all the in between. Okay, sorry, I'm done with my sidebar. But
It doesn't make waves. Nancy, first of all, we love the shit out of you, number one. So that's just there. But number two, all opinions are welcome. I don't just say that. I don't want a chat filled with people who all agree. I encourage the respectful conversations about it. And so if you feel like he was framed, I'd love to hear your thoughts and feedback, because it's when you go back and forth and have those debates, so to speak, that's when you kind of uncover the actual solid information. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I mean, and the reason why this is interesting, for us is this is a court hearing. It's on record. They have evidence that they're speaking to, and we don't have it all in front of us, but we're getting tidbits of what they're seeing.
Yeah. So Anne says, all right. And so in doing this affidavit, you have this working document, and I'm going to start with Dylan Mortensen. If I say DM, do you know who I'm talking about?
Detective Payne says, yes, ma'am, I do.
Oh, God, I'm ready. And she is one of the roommates. Is that right?
All right. Judge Stephen Hippler here now. We're sealed. You can use that name.
I can use the name. Trying to Get a Habit by Miss Taylor. Who is she?
Detective Payne now. She was one of the surviving roommates.
And how many times was Dylan interviewed by law enforcement at the time you wrote this December 23rd report?
If memory serves, it was 4. I think 3 or 4.
In the affidavit, you wrote a statement that she had heard Kaylee go upstairs, yell, quote, someone's here, and run back downstairs. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And you use the words, quote, she thought she heard, end quote. Do you remember that? So Miss Jennings says, Your Honor, I'm going to object. I'm objecting based on the scope of what this testimony is supposed to be. My understanding was it was limited solely to the issue of Franks and IGG. Hippler.
And I'm now responding to Miss Jennings, who is part of the prosecution team. I was just about to ask that question. I don't recall the statements of Dylan being a subject of a motion to suppress separate from the Franks issue. Am I correct about that?
Oh, God, Anne. That is correct, Your Honor.
Okay, so we're not at a Franks hearing on that issue. The only issue we are at a Franks hearing on is the IGG. Yes.
All right. Well, let me rephrase. Let me start from a different place.
I'll sustain the objection.
So then Ann Taylor.
Just,
goes to
get
Brett.
in those jabs.
She's just trying to get in what she can. I respect it, but woo!
She do her thing. Do your thing. And do your thing. She's sorry.
Yeah. Who, Harley? Who did you see? Harley? So Anne goes to Brett Payne. Let's go to the part of your affidavit for December 23rd. AT&T 1, the part where you put in things particular to Bryan Kohberger. You put in that affidavit a traffic stop, I believe, from August in Moscow, Idaho. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
That traffic stop, was that on your radar before December 19th when you learned of Bryan Kohberger's name?
No, ma'am.
Harley, you said you saw him on CCTV scoping out the crime scene afterwards. So I'm just asking what you meant by that. Ann Taylor, the next thing you relied on was a traffic stop at WSU. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Was that traffic stop on your radar before you knew of Bryan Kohberger's name on December 19th?
Hold on, sorry. No, ma'am.
You put in information about front license plates being missing from Pennsylvania cars. Is that right?
Yes. Oh, wow. They're going to go over this. Oh,
Mhm.
wow. Okay. Oh, interesting. Yes, ma'am.
The 1112 video did not show enough of the vehicle that you could see whether it had a front license plate. Is that right?
That sounds correct. Yes.
So it was after you learned of Bryan Kohberger's name that became part of your affidavit. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Where, Harley?
What is that?
Let's talk about the vehicle identification for a minute before I run back down through the rest of that affidavit after Bryan was identified. When you worked with Special Agent Amel to identify a vehicle, was there more than one vehicle he identified?
I don't believe there was. If memory serves, it was just the Hyundai Elantra. That is a good point right there.
Would you agree that he was most comfortable with the years 2011 to 2013?
Hold on. This is important because remember in the PCA, it was written as suspect vehicle 1.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember I even had questions like, did they list them? Did they write it as 1 because maybe they had multiple vehicles?
I was thinking this as the year, and that's exactly what she's going on to say. The years
Oh,
2011 to 2013.
okay. Sorry.
That wording.
I didn't
No,
read
it's the
down.
wording. That's why she does it.
Oh,
Because it's not the same car if it's a 2011 Hyundai Elantra as a 2013 Hyundai Elantra. It's a different year.
okay. Yeah. I was thinking, you know, how they write like, suspect vehicle 1, or did they like list out how many vehicles they saw in the area and they like identified them out that way? We would find out later through, the court process, like what was rolled out. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
yeah. Anyway, sorry. I'll stop.
No, you're fine.
Okay.
Miss
So-
Jennings says, object, Your Honor, for the same reason I don't understand the scope related to IGG. Oh, I thought
Taylor. Miss Taylor.
Ann Taylor, Your Honor, I'm going to ask for a little leeway on this one. I think it will be clear in about 2 more questions. It is a sealed proceeding. I'll be arguing it at Frank's. So Judge Hippler.
I don't want to pollute the record, so approach.
So defense and prosecution approach the bench of Judge Hippler. And then Ann comes back. They looked for 2011 to 2013. It was their BOLO. It was after Bryan was identified by IGG, they expanded the search. So see, she's going not by a different car, just the different year. Of course, she's going to focus on that.
Well, and she added the IGG part into it so she could get it in as well in this questioning. Sorry, anyways. So the court replies, that relates to what?
It's going to relate to the Franks, but it has to do with IGG and when they identified him. I have about 2 more questions along this line.
You have the separate Frank's motion regarding the scope of the car search.
Absolutely.
That we're not here for today. We're here for the IGG. I get the idea that if the IGG is suppressed, the warrants based on IGG is suppressed. That affects a lot of other things, right? But I don't think you need to get into the evidence of that at this point because it's part of the Frank's. There's a separate Frank's motion on that.
There absolutely is. The next question I'm going to get to in the affidavit after the IGG was the police in Pullman running the car. And he has laid it out in the affidavit after the IGG without stating it. So I'm doing the IGG part with him now. That car is a different year than the one the bolo is for. That's as far as I'm going with the car at this hearing.
Counsel.
Miss Jennings, again, for prosecution, I don't understand what that has to do with the IGG. It's part of a Franks hearing related to vehicle identification. I understand her timeline, but I think that point has already been made. They're not wrong. Like,
Yeah.
so Anne says, this was when I was allowed to explore this witness since he's already here and we've paid for him to come here. Judge Hippler.
Yeah, but I didn't open up everything to Franks because we couldn't get into all the other things that I understood we could get into the entirety of Franks on IGG, which is why I allowed it. And that's what we're going to stick to today.
IGG flows. It makes everything.
Can we just like quote that? Sorry. It makes everything.
It makes everything.
Oh, geez. The court. Well, I'm not suggesting we get into other Franks issues that sprung in part from IGG because those are separate based, right? And so I think we just need to talk about the specific IGG stuff today in terms of Franks. There's not a separate motion to suppress based solely on that and not the IGG, if I'm not mistaken, apart from the Franks motions.
To suppress which I'm not following. I'm sorry.
There are mentions to suppress that are not Franks related.
Right. And I'm not going there.
That's evidence we can put on today. But I thought we were going to do that later today.
Absolutely.
There are various Franks motions, one of which is to suppress. Oh, hold on, let me pause here. Do you remember seeing did you ever see the court record, Melissa, where like how they were filed and listed out?
Mm-hmm.
Because just visually, like it, like chat, like if you haven't like looked on the docket, it was basically, multiple filings separately. So that's how this judge is approaching it. They weren't all filed together. So, I mean, that's just how she did it. It's kind of interesting.
It is.
All right. Okay. So, I mean, when she says everything flows, that just makes me laugh even more. Why not just do it all? Okay, so the court. There are various Franks motions, one of which is to suppress. One of the Franks motions is that there was a Franks violation by not informing the magistrate of the use of IGG in violations, as you allege them, in obtaining the IGG. That's the issue we are doing today in terms of evidence, and I want to stick to that. So getting into the car, which is separate, which I understand your argument is the IGG led them to expand the search of the cars, but that's not the Franks issue itself. The Franks issue itself on IGG is the IGG itself, and it's limited to that. All right.
No, you're fine, Harley. I'm sorry. I can't keep up with the chat too much because I'm reading, obviously. But I just like to make sure, because especially with this case, there's so much information. So I always make sure to let it be known, hey, what is fact, what we know to be true, what we believe, but we aren't certain yet, versus what's just speculation. So if I say, hey, that hasn't been confirmed, it's not to be, mean, versus I just like to keep it black and white.
Well, we did a lot of debunking, like if
yes,
you didn't follow back then when we were doing it together. So, I like facts. I like to debunk stuff, and I also like to, I don't know. I mean, I'm a sleuth. I'm nosy. I want to know more. And this is super interesting. But if you're not speculating on the facts that you have at hand, then it can just kind of take you down a slippery slope quick.
Right. So we don't know for certain at all that Bryan Kohberger was seen on CCTV prior to the murders. We know a car was seen on certain certain CCTVs and Ring doorbell. But things like he couldn't have gotten a date, no, that's just speculation. That's pure speculation.
Yeah, and back when we were like covering some of the stuff, even when like Linda Lane footage, came out, um, we were talking a lot with like Susie Goosey and trying to kind of get down to the bottom of like how footage was being obtained. And back then, if you watch, like, we found out that there are people that are interested in purchasing photos from you know media journalists to videos from people, and somebody has obtained them. I'm just saying this is an idea that could have been done, and things were leaked. Now, if you don't have the original clip file, like, people can change things, distort things. So even when we were like looking at the Linda Lane, instead of being like the channel that would just watch it for hours on end, we decided to like pull up the PCA and say, like, can we even like make sense if this is like something legitimate, just to see if it like went with like the turns that Bryan did. So people like to fake audio and do things like that, and I just try to be really careful with it. So,
and we get very literal. If we could see Bryan on CCD, or you could see a car on CC, you know what I mean? Like, we get very, only because it went crazy. It's gone crazy, so we like to keep it very fact based. If we're gonna state something as fact, I'm saying.
right. We all have speculations. I think it's
Yeah, we all
natural
have
to.
speculations. That's why I just let it be known when we're speculating versus when I say something, I'm going to make sure it's fact if I repeat it as fact. Okay.
So she's thinking that a lot changed in terms of the car search once they identified Bryan. That's how I'm seeing her layer this all together.
Well,
Okay.
motive doesn't need to be proven, Holly J, but I totally understand, like, personally why we're like, what's the motive here? But I guarantee if the more evidence that comes out, the clearer picture we'll have. We have to accept that we have had completely a gag order from the very beginning. We have had nothing. That's why this is so crucial to go through, because we're getting little bits of information finally. Yes, that is true, Barlett. Okay.
Right.
So Judge Hippler.
I'm going to sustain the objection. Ms. Taylor.
All the things in the warrant that become particular to Bryan Kohberger were not on your radar before you learned his identity through IGG. Is that correct?
Detective Payne now. Yes, ma'am.
And you elected not to put the IGG identification in your probable cause affidavit. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
What led to that decision?
That decision was a collaborative decision. We made that decision in an effort to independently verify the information that was provided to us as a tip from the FBI, in much the same way we would any other tip in law enforcement. So it was not in any way meant to obfuscate any sort of information. It was simply, can we validate Mr. Kohberger's involvement in this incident, or can we not? That was it.
And no, Neat, his dad was the DNA they linked to him from the trash pull, not the IGG.
Oh, yeah.
The IGG isn't his dad. That his dad was compared to the DNA from the trash pull in Pennsylvania. So Anne says, as a group effort, you decided to intentionally leave that out of your affidavit?
Yes, ma'am.
Given the limitation at this point, I think that's all of my questions.
Judge Stephen Hippler. All right. Cross-examination.
So cross-examination, I am no longer Ann Taylor. I am part of prosecution, and I am Miss Jennings. Shay is still Detective Brett Payne, okay? So Miss Jennings, good morning, Detective. I only have one question for you. Let's go back to December 19th, December 20th, and the information that was provided to the team. Correct? It was a team?
Yes, ma'am.
And who all was part of this team that was receiving this information telephonically from the FBI?
So there was several of us. Yourself, Mr. Thompson was there, Darren Gilbertson from the Idaho State Police, Ed Jacobson from the FBI. I believe there was a couple other folks from the FBI and ISP in the room. I don't remember exactly who they were, and then myself. There was numerous people that were involved.
Would it have been essentially the team leaders for the investigation?
Yes.
Was this any different than the other information sharing that occurred during this case?
Not at all.
There were routine team discussions.
Yes, ma'am. We had 2 official briefings every day of the investigation, morning and evening. So twice a day we would all link up. And that was not just the command team. That was everyone who was not actively on an interview would come back to the police department, sit in the same room, and discuss the information that was learned from the day. So it was very common throughout this investigation for us all to be in the same room and discussing the same information.
So you were not the only investigator receiving information from various sources?
Absolutely not.
So when we talk about this Exhibit A, that wasn't necessarily just your Exhibit A.
No, ma'am, it was not.
It was all the information that the investigators had up to that point.
Yes, ma'am, that is an accurate statement.
Now, related to the IGG and the information you were provided by the FBI, in the information provided, did you receive any medical information about Bryan Kohberger?
No, ma'am, we did not.
I don't have anything further. Thank you.
Court, Steve Hippler, redirect.
I'm Ann Taylor. Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. So now redirect examination begins. Miss Jennings was just talking to you about the team, I guess, that got together a couple of times a day from November 13th until December 19th or 20th is our target time right now.
Yes, ma'am.
Who from the FBI was part of those daily meetings?
Like I said, S.A. Jacobson was there. Maria Tyndall was there. I believe Special Agent Rob Hilly was there, was involved. I'm trying to think of other names. I don't remember any. There were others there. I just don't remember who they were. I apologize.
That's okay. How about who else from the Moscow Police Department?
So Captain Blaker was there. I believe usually Detective Vargas was there. Sometimes Chief Fry would sit in on those meetings. Most nights, Chief Fry would sit on those meetings. Captain Dillinger, Anthony Dillinger, was in those meetings from Moscow Police Department. I'm trying to think of all the others. Basically, the whole command team from MPD itself would be in those meetings, and then whoever else was available from the investigation section would also come on or come in.
Thank you, 2112 Thank you. He says, I think you both are doing a really good job with this material. Not easy to handle. Thank you so much. That really means a lot.
Yeah. I do think it's important though to note that the collaborative effort, because ideally, even whenever you say it's not this case, you are filling out an affidavit, you would have your lead detective, and those people are bringing you information, and you're using their notes, other statements, interviews to be able to write that. I'm just thinking Leilani Simons, like when we went through her court hearing and seeing how the detective was the main cohort of information, but everything was trickling in. So I mean, it's never really just one person. I don't know why. And I guess I'm curious why Anna attacked it like it was just him who was the arbiter of just that information. You know what I mean? Like he's stating it's all his thoughts specifically and not due to the information that he's learning from the investigators or especially law enforcement that's involved.
Absolutely. And that's why her questioning, oh, like it's not even yours. It wasn't even your work. That's why cross-examination is making sure, hey, no, this was a team effort. So no, it wasn't literally like there's a bunch of people on this team working on it. Like it's the collaborative effort. You're right, Shay, is very important to note.
And I mean, they stated that whenever the IGG stuff, Ms. Jennings herself, who was questioning at the time, and the lead prosecutor Bill Thompson, they were in all those meetings with FBI in them. So they sat there, and I would hope, we hope to be a good standing person of the law, that like you would want things to go the right way, because you don't want something to like untangle a potential conviction.
Yep. So Ann Taylor asked Detective Brett Payne on redirect, who from ISP was there?
Darren Gilbertson was there. I believe Detective Joe Lake was there most days. I can't remember who else was consistently there. I remember those two for sure. Lieutenant Mike Mooney was in those meetings. That was the three off the top of my head.
When was the first time you talked about the identification of Bryan Kohberger in those meetings?
As far as when we knew of him?
Yeah.
December 19th.
How many hours of meetings do you think you'd had up until the identification of Bryan Kohberger?
Goodness, many. I don't know. It was a lot.
Twice a day, every day?
Yes, ma'am.
7 days a week?
If not more than that, yeah.
Thank you. That's it.
Detective
Hippler. I was about to say Judge Hippler.
Judge Stephen Hippler. Thank you, Detective. You can step down. Defense can call its next witness.
So Miss Taylor says, I'm sorry?
You can call your next witness?
Okay, so defense's next witness is Rylene Nolan. The clerk swears Miss Nolan in, and so she has been duly sworn and testified as follows. So now, again, I am Ann Taylor. Shay is going to be Miss Nolan now. So, Miss Taylor, good morning.
Good morning.
Will you please state your name for the record?
Rylene, Rylene, Nolan, Nowlin.
I think you've done this before.
A few times.
How are you employed?
I'm employed as a forensic laboratory manager with the Idaho State Police Forensic Services Laboratory in Meridian, Idaho.
Because he has, okay.
What?
I'm just not even. How long have you worked for Idaho State Police Forensics Laboratory?
I have worked for Idaho State Police Forensic Services since November 2002.
Did you have prior experience similar?
Prior to my employment with ISP, I did not.
How were you trained for your job?
I have formal education. I was originally hired as a forensic scientist in the biology DNA unit. As such, I was required to have a degree in biology, biochemistry, or similar. I was required to have coursework in genetics, molecular biology, biochemistry, and statistics. And then I completed the Idaho State Police Forensic Services specialized training program in biology screening, as well as in DNA analysis, as well as in DNA database analysis. And then I've completed hundreds of hours of continuing education over my years.
Are you a member of any professional organizations?
Yes, ma'am.
Which ones?
I am a member of the Northwest Association of Forensic Scientists, the American Association of Forensic Sciences, and the American Society of Crime Laboratory Directors.
Are you part of a collaborative?
Yes. I am a member of the National Technology and Validation Implementation Collaborative.
What is that one about?
That is a group comprised of laboratory management typically. It depends on which portion or subsection of the collaborative that have gathered together to generate ideas for best practices and guidelines for new technologies coming into forensics.
Would investigative genetic genealogy be a new technology coming into forensics?
That is one of the technologies. However, our group refers to it as FIGG, Forensic Investigative Genetic Genealogy.
Okay, wait. FIG.
Let's go.
Okay, I'll try to remember that. That's the one I want to talk about today. So your group is talking about best practices for FIG. Is that right?
That's one of our areas of focus, correct?
Are you doing that because there are practices that are important in that discipline?
We are doing that because it's a new technology coming into the forensics world, and not every laboratory manager has a background in DNA. We also have a group on firearms because not every laboratory manager has a background on firearms. And it's just a resource for those managers as they're looking to implement new technologies.
You mentioned best practices. Does that have anything to do with things that I might refer to as standards or procedures or protocols?
No.
What does best practices mean?
Best practice is a recommendation based on the current knowledge in the field. There are organizations that come up with the standards for different fields, but this group, that is not their purpose.
In your lab, do you have standards and procedures and protocols?
Our laboratory does have what we'll call them analytical methods, as well as our quality system.
Analytical methods and quality systems, they mean the same thing as procedures and protocols?
Yes.
What does that mean to you?
What that means to me, our laboratory is an accredited laboratory, so we have a set of accreditation standards that we must meet. In order to do that, we have set quality policies as well as the analytical methods for each discipline. That ensures that we are consistently performing our scientific analysis in a way that has been validated and shown to be proper for the testing that's being conducted. And it also shows that we are meeting the national standards by which we are accredited. In addition, DNA has additional standards that they must meet called the FBI's Quality Assurance Standards for Forensic Casework Laboratories, as well as for forensic databasing laboratories.
So I want to start with the first part of it. You mentioned, I think, that there's standards and protocols, my definition of them, that helps assure your work so that somebody could look and see what you did and maybe get the same result or understand what you did. Do I understand that right?
Yes, it's the methods we follow, and yes, that would be one application someone could look and see what we did.
Now, you mentioned at the very end of what you told me before, DNA has something separate.
Correct.
What do you mean?
Because our laboratory is a participant in the National DNA Index System, it's commonly referred to as CODIS, which stands for Combined DNA Index System. We are subject to additional standards set forth by the FBI because they manage that database.
And what are those standards?
Those standards are known as the QAS standards. They cover everything from when I listed the classes I had at the beginning, they decided what classes a DNA analyst coming in should have, what education a DNA technical leader should have, what things need to be included in a validation study, how facilities need to be controlled. It covers the gamut of testing.
Validation study, what does that mean?
Whenever a new chemistry, a new instrument, a new procedure is coming along in the laboratory, we perform a study to ensure that the chemistry, instrument, or procedure is working or receiving the expected results.
Okay. And to be sure, you have to do that because you use CODIS?
Our DNA section has to do that because we use CODIS. The rest of the laboratory because of part of our accreditation standards.
Tell me what CODIS is briefly.
Sorry, did Anne have Groundhog Day here? Sorry. She just did you. Oh, sorry, science, big words. I geek out on this stuff. This was my major. Anyways, CODIS, Combined DNA Index Systems, is essentially a national DNA database. It exists on 3 levels. There's a local level, your county sheriff's office, local PDs. There's a state level, which is typically the state laboratory. It is limited to public laboratories, and then the national level. In Idaho, the Idaho State Police Forensic Services Lab in Meridian is the only DNA lab in the state, so there are no local labs in the state of Idaho. And the database contains different, what does it say?
Indices.
Indices. Sorry.
No, you're fine.
There's a forensic index. Those are profiles obtained from items of evidence. There's an offender index. Those are samples from those convicted of qualifying offenses in your state as determined by your state's legislator. Sorry, I have it like on a split screen on my iPad. I was reading because it kept doing that little like flash.
Yeah, no, you're fine.
Okay. If your state legislator allows arrestees, there's an arrestee index. There's also a missing persons index and 4 remains.
Do you have any special role with the CODIS database?
Currently, I'm a CODIS user. That is my only role at the moment.
And what was your role in the fall of November of 2022?
CODIS user.
Do you have any administrative responsibilities with CODIS?
Not currently.
Have you in the past?
In the past, I have served as the alternate state administrator for Idaho.
For CODIS, DNA that goes into CODIS, what kind of profile is used?
If I'm understanding the question correctly, there's different types of DNA profiles, and what goes into CODIS is known as an STR profile or short tandem repeat.
What kind of information is in a short tandem repeat or STR?
Can I give a brief explanation about DNA?
Sure.
So, DNA is a substance that's found in the cells of our body. It acts as a blueprint. It tells our bodies what form to take and how to function. Between individuals, it is over 99% the same. That is why we all have the same basic structure and our bodies function in basically the same way. In forensics and in STRs, we are targeting that less than 1% that is unique to an individual, with the exception of identical twins. And so areas of DNA that vary widely between individuals don't code for anything typically. So it doesn't tell us anything about a person. When I look at an STR profile, I can tell you if that person is genetically male or genetically female, and that is all.
Do you know what an SNP profile is?
I do.
What is that?
A SNP profile is a single nucleotide polymorphism. So you're looking at a single nucleotide, whereas the STR is a series of repeating nucleotides. A specific repeating that we're looking for.
The SNP, then, is that a closer look at a person's genome?
I would like to state that I'm not an expert in SNPs. I'm not qualified in the SNP technology and have not ever been qualified in the SNP technology. With STRs, depending on the chemistry, you're looking at anywhere from 13 to 25 plus locations. With S&Ps, my understanding is in general, you're looking at a minimum of 10,000.
Does that mean there's more information about a human contained in an SNP that there is in an STR profile?
Mr.
Nye.
Okay.
Your
You want me to do
Honor.
that?
Yeah, you could do the court. Your Honor, I'm going to object at this point. This witness is not disclosed as an expert, and she just testified she's not an expert in SNP technology. So, Judge Hippler.
I appreciate that with respect to her answer, and I will take that into account in the event that defense intends to rely on that testimony. I took it as sort of a background about her general knowledge. I'll allow it for now. I'm not taking it as expert testimony about that S&P beyond the basic understanding of what S&P is.
Sorry, hold on. I know that this is a sound in the background, so let me just fix it.
No, you're good.
Okay. Sorry about
Chat,
that.
y'all doing okay?
So Ann Taylor says, thank you. Do you remember my question?
Yes. I would assume if you're looking at a larger part of the human genome, that you would be getting a larger amount of information about someone.
I have one more question about CODIS, and then I want to move into a different area. You mentioned that there's 4 indexes, and you talked about a forensic. Sorry, I saw I was doing it, and I tried to fix it. You mentioned it's just natural at this point.
Viv,
You mentioned
Viv.
I'm trying not to do that. You mentioned that there's 4 indexes, and you talked about a forensic
Just do
index.
it. Just
can't. I'm
commit to
trying
it.
not
Do
to
it.
be disrespectful. I don't want to. It just happens, though.
Okay, sorry.
No, you're fine.
All right. Riley answers correct.
What is that one used for?
The forensic index is where profiles generated from items of evidence can be uploaded. There are rules about what can be uploaded, though. It cannot match someone known to be the victim of a crime. It cannot match someone whose DNA should be in a place outside of a crime being committed. It cannot be anything taken directly from a suspect of a crime where you would reasonably assume their DNA would be present. It must be related to a crime, and it must be believed to be from the putative perpetrator of that crime. So, I mean, that's a lot to unpack. That's good to know, though, for people that had a lot of questions.
Sorry, I was writing that page down.
Can I run real quick to the restroom? I'm sorry. I drink a whole water. Okay.
Please do.
Be right back. Little stretch the leg break. Be right back.
Yeah, take a second. Stretch your lobes. Thank you all so much for being here. Please take a second, hit that thumbs up if you already haven't. I think I'm absorbing the information best when we read it out loud like this. Like I said, we're gonna have to break this up probably into 2 streams, hopefully not 3, I think 2, to get through the whole transcript. This is a reading of the transcript from the January 23rd court hearing, which was originally sealed. We got to see the second half of it, not the first half. And so it's really interesting to know what was happening in that courtroom before. I know you, right? Okay, knock that off. Yeah, no bathroom breaks allowed, right? Oh my good. So how's everyone doing? I think the most interesting part so far was going into the Dillon area and the 2 unknown male B and unknown male D. Oh, nice, Penny. The second, if you're talking about the case against Bryan Kohberger playlist, the second one is the warrants against Bryan and what they found. Thanks, Natasha. We're all doing good here. I don't have to potty. I'm okay. I'm a little hungry, but I'm not going to eat on a live. Just filling in the time. Thank you, Andy. I'm so excited. And then after this transcript, we have the denial of the Franks next. And then today, oh yeah, Penny, they demolished the house a while ago.
Oh yeah. Sorry.
No, you're
My
fine.
husband's like, my daughter fell asleep. Brush your teeth. I had like all the questions. It's like, you can function without me.
Yeah,
Ask her. Get her to brush the teeth.
yeah, get her to do it.
You do it.
She's still around. Katrina, just not so much on YouTube. That Clint Hill, yeah. Hell, I got Gush. I got a new box of Gushes over in that corner. Yeah, I know, Natasha. Okay, so we have Anne saying, so if I understand it, you use DNA, get an STR, and only under certain circumstances can you use CODIS. Do I understand that right?
Correct.
Okay. Outside of CODIS, and I understand what that does. If you create a profile, a DNA profile of somebody, is that a separate thing you do in your lab, even if you're not going to run them through CODIS?
Yes. We receive items of evidence or samples from known individuals. We generate a DNA profile from those.
Did you become involved in the homicide in Moscow from 2022?
Involved as the manager of the laboratory in Meridian. I haven't actually done any work on any evidence in the case or issued any reports.
All right. Is it fair to say you did not go to that residence then?
Correct.
As the lab manager, do you understand about what evidence has come into the lab from that case?
There was a lot of evidence submitted. I have a general knowledge of items that have come in, but I could not provide you a detailed list off the top of my head.
And that's okay. I won't ask you to.
Thank you.
As a lab manager, are you aware of different bits of testing that were done related to this case?
In general, yes.
Are you aware of a profile called Unknown Male A?
Yes.
Where did that come from?
To my recollection, Unknown Male A came from a swab taken from a knife sheath that was submitted by Moscow Police Department.
Are you aware of Unknown Male B?
I believe that was another sample from hearing the previous testimony that was from in the house.
I would only want you to testify from your own base of knowledge.
From my own memory, I don't recall exactly where B was from.
At this point, 2112 like you, I'm leaning towards he's the guy, but I am completely open to going where the evidence takes me. So I'm just leaning towards he's the guy, but that might change. So fair enough. Thank you for clarifying that for me. Are you aware that investigative genetic genealogy or forensic investigative genetic genealogy was used in this case?
Yes.
What was your role in that?
My role specific to this case was facilitating the signing of a memorandum of understanding, making sure all parties received it and had signed it. Those parties being the police agency, the prosecuting attorney's office, as well as a member of ISP's management team. And then when the preliminary report was received, my job was to look over it, ensure that it had all the required pieces in the report, and then to authorize payment of the invoice for that testing. Oh, Lordy.
What role did you have with the laboratory that was going to perform the FIG work?
As far as how we came to be in contract with them, so when ISP decided to pursue a contract with a laboratory that could perform the S&P testing that we talked about earlier, we're a state agency, so we don't just get to call up anybody and hire them. So we had to go through a bid process. So part of my role was developing the scope of work for that invitation to bid, as in what we expected the vendor to perform. And then when the bids came in, I was involved in the team that evaluated the documents that were submitted. And then ultimately, the Division of Purchasing determined who won the bid.
Did Idaho State Police Forensics have a contract with this laboratory, Orthrum?
They were the winning bid through that process. And so they were under contract with the Department of Purchasing, correct?
Is the contract with the Department of Purchasing that you perform these services and we pay you for them essentially? Or does it have more meat to it to talk about some of the things that you were talking about? How you help develop, I guess, the job description and what would be required?
Well, personally, I kind of know how the government bidding goes, but I'm gonna not get into that.
Yeah.
There is like a separation of powers that go there, and basically, so just so everyone knows, like when you're doing government contract bidding, you're required to have at least three bids, like, so meaning like three different places to provide to ensure that you are getting the best government contractual rate possible. So it's also to avoid, there's got to be overlap too, to ensure like somebody's not like, trying to like, I don't know, maybe hire a friend and, that kind of helps out their friend's pocket to avoid any kind of like scams and moving kind of money. So, I mean, they have them like really like separated and like a very bigger process. Just so people are curious. That was the dork side of me. Sorry.
I love it.
I did some government contracting. Okay. Anyways, okay. I am really not familiar with the Department of Purchasing's day-to-day operations or how they operate. My role was strictly developing that scope of work. We expect them to develop the profiles that can be uploaded to the public genealogy databases. We expect them to provide us a written report. We expect the report to contain certain things, to have a header, to have a date, to list the case number, have page numbers, those kinds of things.
Outside that description of the scope of work and the requirements, did your lab have a separate contract with Orthrum that basically said you agree to do these things?
We had that they won the bid from Division of Purchasing, and that's the state contract for performing that work.
You mentioned a memorandum of understanding you helped facilitate to be signed by the parties. Was Orthrum one of the parties that signed that?
No, this is a memorandum between the law enforcement agencies, the prosecuting attorney's office, and the laboratory.
And in that memorandum of understanding that indicated that interim Department of Justice, the Department of Justice interim policy applied. Is that right?
I believe it did. I don't have the exact text memorized.
Good night, J1. If I showed you a copy of that memorandum of understanding, would that help you remember if that was part of it?
Yes.
Your Honor, if I could just have a moment to gather that, it's not being offered as an exhibit.
Steve Hippler now. Just refreshing.
It's to aid in her memory.
So it's the state's counsel.
So then she hands it to her witness. So does looking at that refresh your memory as to whether the Department of Justice interim policy applied?
It does say in the first paragraph that it did apply.
And Your Honor, I'm going to refer to Defense Exhibit D19 here and ask the witness to be shown that, and then I'll provide the court my copy.
When was this filed?
That would have been filed with the amended Frank's memorandum on the bottom of that page. I'm sorry.
I've got thousands of filings. I have to go by date to find things.
Wow, man. I think it was November 18th or 20th. At the bottom of that page, however, you can see some numbers in red, and those were numbered to make it easier to find.
I just need to find it in the computer first, all right? I found it in my printed documents.
So, Ms. Taylor, to her witness, is that the Department of Justice interim policy?
Yes. The Department of Justice interim policy on forensic genetic genealogical DNA analysis and searching.
And in Section 7, I believe it's Section 7 or page 7.
Investigative caution. That section?
Let me ask you the question. Are you familiar with the provision in that policy that says if there's a prosecution case, if somebody is arrested and there's a prosecution case, all items in the forensic investigative genetic genealogy should be preserved for court purposes?
I believe that is part of, I don't think it's in section 7. It might be, but I believe that is part of preserving.
Okay. What I want to know is, what did Othram preserve?
I don't know.
What did you get back?
We received a preliminary report in other cases. We will sometimes get back the DNA extract that was sent to them. I don't recall if we got that back in this case. Anything our laboratory receives, we return to the submitting agency.
Would validation be part of that? Validation studies?
I wouldn't assume so. I would assume that would be part of this, no?
Would bench notes be important?
Judge Stephen Hippler. I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. What notes?
Bench notes, lab bench notes.
Thank you.
So then the witness.
For our laboratory, we designate those as part of our case record. I'm not familiar with what Othram designates as part of their case record.
So I guess then that means you don't have any of those.
No, only the preliminary report.
Okay, so let me just pause there. So again, I understand the concern for, hey, none of the IgG, the record wasn't stored. We don't have that. But I also understand, like, Anne is using, if any of this is to be used for prosecution, you're supposed to store it. You guys, please don't forget, the prosecution is not presenting that. So it technically doesn't have to be. They're not using it to present it, prosecuting Bryan. Now, if it was being used, then there's that major issue. But I also can understand, because I've absolutely, it's like, well, you didn't save any of it. I get that part too, but I'm just trying to stick to the facts here. And the fact is, it's not being used in prosecution. So even by Anne's own words there, you're pointing out something that does not apply.
And just, you know, for the prosecution standpoint, they're saying, like, you know, over and over, like, you know, the IgG is just a tip. It's not what
Right.
we used. We were able to obtain, you know, the trash and led to all that stuff. So
Right.
it flows. Remember, everything flows.
Yes, everything flows.
Okay.
So Ann Taylor says, all right, I will move to a different area of questioning, and it's about the requirements with Othram. You mentioned the goal was to create profiles and create a report, but to search public databases.
Correct. There are public genealogy databases that will allow entry of law enforcement samples, and that is part of the scope of work. They were required to enter it into those databases.
And are you aware there are databases that do not allow law enforcement to search?
Hold on. Are you aware? Yes.
Were you part of work after Othram began their work to try and do an investigation?
I was not. As far as, I guess I'm unclear. We received evidence submitted to the laboratory before, during, and after for all sections. Is that what you're referring to?
Let me rephrase my question. I think that question was too broad. While Othram was doing their work, were you part of any work to help Othram? For instance, did you get any documents that you did some research on to try to help Othram?
No.
Were you aware that Othram was just stopped from doing any further work at some point?
I was aware of that.
And was this before they produced any result?
No. We received a preliminary report. I recall receiving that because that's how I know I can approve payment of the invoice. So I know we received that prior to them being told they were stopped.
Were you part of the decision to stop them?
I was not.
How did you find out about it?
I found out about it in an email from my laboratory system director.
Do you remember when that happened?
I don't recall.
Does the forensics lab continue to contract with Othram?
Yes.
If Othram had a file that would have had validation studies and bench notes, anything they did on the case, who would have received that?
Again, validation studies would be odd to associate with individual cases, so I wouldn't assume they would do that. Again, I'm not familiar with their procedures, and as far as who would receive documents, usually it would be, I would assume, the agency which we receive that preliminary report.
Oh, no, and don't worry about that, Oloka Squirrel, and I hope that everything is fine with your child and they recover, and well wishes, absolutely. So Anne says, you mentioned you're not familiar with their procedures.
For Othram? Oh, sorry, not in detail, no.
What procedures are you familiar with?
For Othram?
Yes.
As part of the bid process, all of the bidders were required to submit. I believe they were required to submit their procedures. And it was essentially just looking over them to say, yes, they have a procedure in place for extracting DNA. Yes, they have a procedure in place for doing S&Ps. So, yes, they meet the minimums for the invitation to bid. But again, I'm not qualified in that technology, so I wouldn't have studied them or rendered an opinion on them.
I won't ask you for your opinion on them. I won't ask you to quote them to me, but you saw those.
Yes, at the very beginning of the bid process.
All right, so let's switch gears. In the case that we're here for today, do you recall there being a trash pull? Court reporter.
I'm sorry, there being a what?
A trash pull. Witness.
I recall receiving evidence from a trash pull, correct.
What role did you have in deciding anything about that trash pull?
Nothing about that trash pull occurring. I do recall there being a brief. I can't remember if it was a phone meeting or a video meeting, and just being asked in general what items from someone's trash are good for DNA.
Did you give advice?
I don't know if it was me specifically or another member of our DNA unit, but we did offer suggestions on items that are good for DNA.
Did you receive items to test?
Yes.
And what instructions were you given about those items?
The discussion was a person of interest that had been developed and to analyze the items from the trash to determine if they could be inclusive of the DNA profile that was developed from the knife sheath unknown male A.
What date was that you received the trash?
The trash was received into the laboratory on December 28th of 2022.
So you were looking for a male profile?
Correct.
All right. Did you find male profiles?
I didn't perform the actual testing, but yes, there were male profiles developed.
How many?
I don't know.
Do you know anything about either male profile or any of them?
I believe one of the male profiles designated as E was determined they could be a biological parent or child of the profile from the knife sheath.
And are you aware that Bryan Kohberger's DNA was in the trash?
Wait, what?
Yeah, that I was going to say in the trash.
Interesting. I don't know what to think about that. Sorry. Okay. I was not aware.
Did you become aware?
I became aware later. We didn't have.
Did you cut out? Did she cut out or did it cut out for me? No, it's not King Scarlet. Can you guys hear her or can I just not hear her? I don't see her bubble moving. Oh, she gone. Hi, Chief. Shay Bonet, this is our curd break. I want curds now, cheese curds. I've only had them once. but you guys are making me really hungry. So, hey, Cleo. Shay. Maybe if I say it louder, she could hear me. She said, hold on. Hold on. Another one bites the dust. Boom, boom, boom. Like, I've been to, like, to Dairy Queen once. It was the worst experience of my life. I'll never have it. But I had cheese curds there, fried, but it wasn't. It could be like multiple different kinds, but I'm more of a white cheese lover. Oh, Jessica. Honestly, no, I prefer cheese curds. Like, give me some. But like, you know what? No, actually, I had normal cheese curds once in Wisconsin, and it was fucking fabulous.
Can you hear me?
Hi.
Hi. It yeeted me. It just was gone.
You dipped off mid-sentence.
It was weird. I was like, what is happening?
Okay. So, woo-wee! Natasha says, pepper cheese curds. I don't know what the pepper cheese cubes are, but yum. Clovers, okay. Amanda? I don't know what clovers are. Yeah, cheap. Okay, you guys are getting me starving. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I was not aware. Okay, I became aware later. We didn't have his name at the time.
You didn't know his name on December 28th?
No, I did not.
Okay. Were you on December 28th? Were you aware that not male E, but another male profile had been identified? Ah, okay.
From?
The trash.
The trash bowl? I knew there was some mixtures of DNA that were also included.
One of the mixtures, did it have a male DNA profile? Ma'am, that's half of the population. Okay.
I believe it did.
And wasn't that profile the major component of that profile with a minor female?
I believe that sounds correct.
And later, didn't that return to Bryan Kohberger?
We actually did not perform that comparison.
Did you and I have a discussion a few days ago?
We did.
Did you tell me that you knew that to be Bryan Kohberger's DNA?
I said I thought that was, and I could not find the report where we had done that comparison. I've since looked through and we did not make that comparison. So I cannot say that he was included in that mixture. Our laboratory did not do that comparison.
But a DNA profile was made for that mixture. Is that right?
Yes.
And there's a minor female and a major male.
That is my understanding.
And you could, by eye, look at that and tell that's Bryan Kohberger, couldn't you, if you wanted to?
If I wanted to, I could probably look. I did not.
Okay. You could still do it today if you wanted to.
If there was a request to do the comparison, again, we don't do a visual comparison evidence to evidence. Our procedures don't allow us to do that for probative comparisons.
I need you to help me understand that a little bit. I'm having that question because I understand there was an unknown male B found on lab item 30. Do you know what I'm talking about?
No.
Okay. Well, I also understand there was a cigarette butt taken from somebody in connection with this case investigation. Are you familiar with that? And we did hear about that previously.
I am familiar with that.
And that was compared to the DNA on the knife sheath. Is that right?
Yes.
That's good, guys. Like that's good. And that was found to be excludable. Am I using that word right?
It was an exclusion, correct.
So you compared something that was taken from somebody to an item of evidence. Is that right?
Something that was a secondary reference, as in someone identified it as they saw that person using that item. They saw that person dispose of that item. That item was collected and used as a reference sample from that person because there was someone who said that is from that person.
That's interesting. Who were they watching and collected that from? Who'd they want the DNA from?
Well, and it's interesting too that she would only do that like, sorry, this is crazy. They would only compare it directly to the knife sheath.
Yes.
They know exactly who it is.
Because they know who that source is versus taking two unknown sources and comparing it.
Yeah, that is
But who
interesting.
were they watching? I'm very curious. Who were you watching and waiting to get DNA from to compare it?
And who's smoking cigarettes? Let's go
Yeah.
look at all the damn videos.
Yep. So Anne says, okay, when you got the trash to go through in the lab, you knew that you were looking for a male, right?
Correct.
And you knew that the male and his family members lived in a house that produced that bag of trash. Is that right?
Yes,
No,
but
I see
not.
what you're doing, Anne. Sorry.
No, you're fine. Hold on 1 second. Sorry, one of my.
No, you're fine.
I was trying to put my hair back up in a messy bun, and it like pulled out my AirPod. Okay, sorry. Yes, but not who produced each individual item in that trash pull. Wait,
So
sorry.
just for you guys to understand, like taking a cigarette butt that let's say a detective is watching me smoke a cigarette and I toss the cigarette butt. They're able to pick that cigarette butt up and say, hey, compare this to the DNA on the sheath. I know it came from Melissa Jade. I saw her smoke the cigarette. Versus I'm in my house or trash gets thrown out and there's multiple people living in my house. They don't know which item came from me and whose DNA is on each item versus my mom, my dad, my sister, my child. You know what I mean? There's a difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So Anne says, okay.
It wasn't labeled. This water bottle is from person of interest. This tissue is from a sibling. This Q-tip is from a parent. We didn't have that information. It was just, here's some items from a trash pull.
And one of those items you took and developed is male E.
I did not, but yes, the laboratory did.
All right. In general, the lab developed male E.
Correct.
And compared male A, the DNA in the knife sheath, and male E.
There was a paternity statistic calculated because they were both single source profiles, meaning only from one individual.
Okay. And there's another male profile.
Okay, so can I just pause this real quick? Because this is just one thing. And I know, like, at this point right now, we only know of the knife sheath connecting, with this, as it's been pointed out, as a single, source. But I've also been just curious, speculative wise, that, like, could there have been some mixture and things and they just weren't able to isolate it? Like, they stuck with that
Absolutely.
sheath because of that single source.
Absolutely.
It'll be interesting to see what else they may have. Good night, MK.
Good night, MK.
Loves ya. Okay, sorry. Woo, I want to know more.
I know.
Okay, so that was part of mixture. So that was a part of mixture to my knowledge, meaning more than one person's DNA present on that item.
Again, only one male though. Is that right?
So when there's a mixture on an item of evidence, I don't know if you want me to explain the process. The first step is determining number of contributors to that mixture. Then our laboratory utilizes a software program to help break out the components of that mixture. When one individual is male, it's not always possible to say the gender of the second person. Males have an X and a Y chromosome. Females only have an X. So if there's an X and a Y present, it could be one male. It could be two males. It could be a male and a female. Without comparing to known reference samples, I can't say that. And I haven't seen the profile to my knowledge. No, she's good in answering. She's very, and I like how too Rich would be like, you did it. She's like, the laboratory did.
Yep. Okay. Did you tell me though on that sample, and I'm talking about 95.9.1, that was a male and a female?
I believe that, I don't know if it was designated as that in the laboratory report. To my knowledge, it was, I can't remember what the report said. Again, I didn't generate the report and I didn't do the work. So I'm not as familiar with it as if it was my own work.
Okay, male B was also a mixture, wasn't it?
I don't know.
Okay.
If it was designated as unknown male B, again, I don't know if it was from a mixed sample or not.
Your Honor, if I may have just a moment, thank you for that. So just a couple other questions for you. As it relates to male E, it was compared to the sheath. Is that right?
Correct. A paternity comparison.
Male E was compared to a lot of other evidence items in this case, wasn't it?
Correct.
And you are allowed to do a manual interpretation per your policy, right?
If there is, so it's not black and white. So if it's a single source and we can look at it and say that person is excluded, they are not the source of the DNA, then yes, that can be done manual. And by manual, I mean a person looking at it. If it is a probative comparison, and how we define a probative comparison is if it's saying something about who could be the source of the DNA on an item of evidence that's relevant to the case, then no. We do not do a manual comparison and issue a statement about that because of all of our standards. We have to issue a statistic so that the trier of fact has something to gauge how unique that could be. What is the likelihood that the DNA could be from someone else? We provide that statistic. We don't just say it matches. That requires a statistical calculation, which we use a probabilistic genotyping software to do. And it's your turn.
I apologize. I think I got lost in there. Are you telling me because it was a mix, you couldn't have done a manual interpretation of 95.9.1?
Because it is a mixed profile, and because if it was, you're saying it was Bryan's DNA, Bryan Kohberger's DNA present, that would be a probative comparison in the case, which we have to provide a statistic in order to make that statement. In order, hold on, 1 second. Sorry, I thought I made call. In order to deconvolute a mixture, we are no longer allowed to do those manually. A deconvolute, as in separate the mixture into its components, we have a software. That software was not designed for, nor was it validated for, doing evidence to evidence comparisons.
No, now you're speaking my language. Validations are important for integrity. Is that right?
In forensics, our laboratory uses validations to ensure any new tool is working properly. No, stop the board.
Now, at some point later, your lab issued a report saying matching the DNA on the sheath with DNA taken from Bryan Kohberger. Is that right?
That's correct, and a statistic was provided.
Now I want to talk about what we're talking about when we say the sheath. You're familiar with what happened with the sheath for swabbing. Is that right?
I've seen the sheath and I know how our laboratory performs swabbing of evidence, but I did not swab the item of evidence, nor did I see it being swabbed.
As I understand it, though, you've read the lab notes?
At one point, I believe I did read the notes. I think I was asked a question and the analyst was out of town or something.
And I think you answered that question to law enforcement after consulting somebody else who was with the swabber when the sheath was swabbed. Is that right?
It's sounding familiar.
If I understand the lab reports, it's a single source on the knife sheath. Is that right?
Correct.
Does that mean it's only one person in that area?
Yes, that was detected through our testing.
tell me where you think that sheath was swabbed for purposes of DNA collection.
I believe the analyst swabbed there's kind of a snap or a button that was the top of the snap, and that's the area that was swabbed. There were other areas on it sampled as well.
For the purposes of unknown male A that you're telling us later come back to Bryan Kohberger, that's the only place I want to talk about right now. Are we on top of the button, the outside or on the inside? The socket portion of the button?
I know on the top, I don't recall if she swabbed the underside or not. I'd have to look at her notes again.
Do you know sorry, go ahead.
I'm just actually sorry. I just wrote I know they have her up here as the manager. My question is why wouldn't they have the person who actually, did this on, as well? Because that's just kind of puts her in a tough position,
Can I admit to something?
Yeah.
I was a little distracted for the last 5 minutes because I ordered cheese curds.
Cheese curds? Is that what's going on?
Yes. Because they got me so hungry. They got me so hungry, and I made an impulsive live decision to fucking order cheese curds.
I didn't even know you eat cheese curds.
I didn't know either. Like I said, I've only had it that one time, but I fucking got so hungry, and they kept talking about it.
Have you ever had them?
I've had real cheese, like the cold cheese curds from Wisconsin when I was a kid, but I've had Dairy Queen's shitty cheese curds.
Wait. Dairy Queen doesn't have cheese curds? What are you talking about? Maybe up north. They don't have them in the South. That's like a northern thing.
So sorry that I was a little distracted. I was a pig and I ordered DoorDash from cheese curds, okay? So I'm sorry. But
no, they don't, Woofy.
Yes, they do, Shay. I just ordered them because they're the only place open with cheese curds. So I did order them. I wasn't multitasking good. I think it was very obvious that I was distracted the last few minutes, and I have no shame in my cheese curd game.
And I was looking at chat because I was like, you're not chatting in there because normally if you're seeing something
distracted,
go down,
I'm typing. I know. I was ordering cheese curds, and I was trying to meet the minimum to get the deal that it was giving. And so I was like, shit, I gotta add more cheese curds. So sorry.
I've only had cheese curds in Wisconsin, but I've had poutine a lot. When I would travel to Canada, I love poutine.
No, I didn't get wings. I just got the cheese curds, and then I got the fucking pretzels with the cheese because someone said the chest pretzels with the cheese was so good, and I'm just hungry.
You ordered Dairy Queen on DoorDash?
Yeah, I fucking hate Dairy. Like I said, I only went there once, but they're the only place open with cheese.
Did you get a Blizzard at least?
No, I don't know. I don't care.
What What?
I don't care about that. No, I've never had a Blizzard. I don't want a Blizzard. Thank you, Shiggers. Have a good night.
What do you put on your cheese curds? I don't understand.
You put a Blizzard on your cheese curd?
No, fuck no. But what is it? It's just a curd. Do you put a sauce?
I think it's just cheese. You
don't put a sauce?
Do they come with marinara?
Why would you put marinara? That's like a mozzarella stick.
It's the same
mozzarella stick.
Then I'm gonna eat it alone. I don't know. Fuck. Shit. Don't put this pressure on me. I didn't order anything with it.
This is so weird.
Whatever. Let's just get back to this. I just needed to be honest of why I was distracted, okay? Because I felt like I was hiding something from you guys. To be honest, I'm sorry I got so distracted. Oh man. Okay, so Anne says, do you know if that sheath was part of that preserved for fingerprinting?
Oh shit. The swabbing was done first. That's our laboratory standard order of processing. If DNA is needed in fingerprints, they will work together. Essentially, Layton's, fingerprints will say we can see some possible rich detail. So if you can avoid this area after DNA says we want to swab this, and they come to a decision of what would best suit that item of evidence to determine where to swab. So the swabbing takes place first. So do you follow that?
Mm-hmm.
So fingerprints gets their say on where they're going to take it, and then comes they're doing it.
Yep. I think I don't have any other questions right now. Thank you.
Okay, Court, how long do you think you have? I'm just trying to gauge a break here.
I'd say 10 minutes.
Let's take 10 minutes and we'll be back.
So let's finish out this witness, okay? So recess and the court comes back, Judge Hippler.
Mr. Nye, you may inquire.
So now I'm going to be Mr. Nye from prosecution during cross-examination. Shay is still going to be our witness, Rylene. So
Deputy Attorney General.
Mr. Nye, good morning. I just have a few questions for you today. So you talked a little bit about policies and procedures in the lab. Do you recall that testimony?
I don't know. I was laughing. Whoopi, Bill Nye the Science Guy. Do you remember watching Bill Nye the Science Guy?
Yeah.
I loved Bill Nye the Science Guy. He was so like quirky and cool. Anyways.
Hey, Carolyn Cooper.
Moving on. You're just distracted with curds.
I read it. Here, I'll do it again. Okay. So you talked a little bit about policies and procedures in the lab. Do you recall that testimony?
Yes.
And you talked about there are policies and procedures related specifically to DNA. Is that correct?
Correct.
As part of those policies and procedures, does the lab need to have a legitimate reason to test DNA?
Yes. We only test DNA related to criminal investigations or to death investigations, and it needs to be an item that will answer a probative question in a case.
So, for example, if someone at the lab wanted to test DNA out of curiosity about medical information, that would not be consistent with that policy.
We don't do curiosity testing, and none of our testing would provide medical information.
You also testified that you were involved in or maybe primarily responsible for developing the scope of work request for Othram. Is that correct?
Hold on. Wolfie, I am not 51. You stop that shit. Sorry. How dare you?
And you weren't here to order my curds, Wolfie. Just
We don't even know she just ordered mozzarella sticks, okay?
No, I ordered curds. I get receipts or it didn't happen. I'll show you.
I'm not 50. Oh my God.
Good night, Charlie.
Okay. I was part of that, yes.
And what is the scope of work request?
That just goes with, and this was my first one I've done. So I don't have vast experience in this process. But when we're going to contract with the vendor, just going through and outlining what we expect them to do is part of that.
And what do you recall about this request specifically? What were you requesting Othram to do?
Specifically, we were requesting them, if necessary, to perform DNA extraction, pulling the DNA out of the cells on an item of evidence. If necessary, our laboratory typically did that. We were requesting them to generate a SNP profile using either SNP array or whole genome sequencing. We were requesting them to then upload that to all public databases that allow law enforcement samples. We were requesting them to generate a report. We were requesting them to notify us or to complete the lab portion of the work. Generation of the profile within 60 days, I believe. I believe there was also information in there about not publicly giving our case information to the public without our express permission, things of that nature.
Was there anything in the scope of work requests related to medical information?
No.
So you weren't asking Othram to determine if this DNA, the person whose DNA this was, had, for example, cancer. Now, let me pause for a second because this is multiple times we keep hearing about this and this medical information, and it's really intriguing to me. Like, what are they talking about here? And thank you, Wolfie, for the $1.99. Thank you both for reading at big girl levels. Fuck you.
50. Big girl. Okay, so I think that they're doing that because it went back to when if Othram if Othram gets a hit, right? Then um that so that that person, their DNA could possibly connect. They'd have to do a family tree and go back to it. But as where it because it's the other person's DNA that they're matching against, then Bryan technically doesn't have any rights to that other person's DNA. But his rights are concerned with would be probably medically. That's the way I'm taking this. And I
Yeah.
did see that theme. That's my thought process. Is that where you're going?
Well, it's like the fact that it's a reoccurring theme. I'm curious, is there's some underlying reason why they keep referring to this medical, what medically would they test for?
Well, that would be an invasion of his rights. Like,
And does he have something medically going on?
well, I just think so say they did go that route, like maybe that is a point of contention that could, result in it, there'd be I don't know, like overstepping the line, you know what I mean?
But even if, okay, I don't know. It's interesting. I don't want to speculate too far. I just know that it keeps getting brought up. And so that's sticking out as a mental note to me.
Yeah, because I just remember, well, because I was kind of going back to like what we did get to hear of the open hearing at the time was that, Judge Hippler was kind of driving that point that like it's not like that Ryan's DNA was in the database being compared to, it was somebody else's kind of thing. So he doesn't have rights over that. And then I remember the medical part being brought up and them expressing that they had gone over that and it was addressed, and no, there was not there was no request or need to obtain medical information on him.
That's interesting, Sarah Bell. I'm gonna have to look more into that because, yeah, Leave It to Bees are like, I know. I'm sorry, the damn Kurds. I know.
I think some of these companies you can opt in to see like if like maybe what part of your DNA you may be able to like get cancer or have other diseases. Maybe that's an option. We should look into that.
I'm
That
gonna.
could be something. Because what if that was something maybe like somebody submitted and they're like saying you can only look at it for this legal purpose, but nowhere can law enforcement ever look at the medical. I don't know. I mean, that's just interesting.
It is interesting. I made a note of it because I'm curious where this is going to go.
Genetically okay, sorry, I was looking at chat.
So
Birds and DNA.
I know. Needs like it was me. I mentioned it. It took on a life of its own. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. I haven't eaten. I'm hungry too.
I know. So you weren't asking Othram to determine if this DNA, the person whose DNA this was had, for example, cancer.
No.
Now, in your position and in this case, you testified you didn't actually do any of the testing, but you've read a lot of the reports that were involved. Is that correct?
Hold on one second. I got something personal I need to mute real quick.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Christina. No, you're fine.
Okay. I've seen a lot of reports, correct.
And of all the reports you've read, have you seen that kind of information?
No. The testing our laboratory doesn't generate any medical information.
And you also talked about in the scope of work, Othram was required to provide you with at least one report.
At least one report, correct.
And did you have a chance to review that?
I have seen that report, yes.
Did it contain medical information?
No, it did not.
which again, this means it's the defense who's coming in it with the medical information. Like, I'm
So
very curious about it.
this part was sealed in the Franks, so we didn't get to see like why they were asking that.
Yeah.
It is interesting.
Now, you also talked a little bit with Miss Taylor about MOU. Do you remember that discussion?
Yes.
I just want to be clear. Who were the parties to that MOU?
The parties to that MOU specific to this case were the Moscow Police Department, the Latah County Prosecuting Attorney's Office, and the Idaho State Police Forensic Services.
So Othram was not a party to that MOU?
Correct.
And the FBI was not a party to that MOU?
Correct.
In another part of your testimony, you spoke with Miss Taylor about the trash pull. Do you recall that testimony?
Yes.
And that one of the samples that was pulled from the trash, that was a mixed sample, your lab did not compare that. Is that correct?
Correct.
And can you explain why you did not compare that?
So initially we did not compare that because it was a mixed profile. We did not know the source of that profile. So it could not be considered a secondary reference. So we deem that to be an evidentiary sample. And we can't make a manual comparison of evidence to evidence, especially when there's a mixture. And if the analyst, again, I was not the analyst. If the analyst did the comparison and determined that unknown male A could have been in that mixture, it would have been inappropriate to compare those two samples together per our analytical methods.
And so the decision not to compare that, who made that decision?
That would have been the analyst that worked the case.
So you weren't, to your knowledge, no one at the lab was advised, for example, by the lead investigator on this case, which of those items to test?
No.
You also gave some testimony about the knife sheath and the swabs on the knife sheath. Do you recall that?
Yes. And you know, actually I watched like this, like they had this like video the ISP lab does out. I remember watching this on YouTube a while back, but just like their like what their facilities like look like procedures, kind of standard things. And I find it really interesting because even like some of the interviews, like some of them, they talk about how they don't want a whole bunch of information from like law enforcement. They need to be able to like come to that like on their own and not be swayed, you know?
Yeah. And thank you, 2112. Thank you. Melissa, we saw in OJ's case that the prosecution lost the jury with the technical DNA evidence. Do you think that the technical nature of the evidence here is a concern for prosecution? No, I don't. I think the only concern at this point is being able to show that proper protocol was followed in regards to obtaining his profile. That's the only thing, but everything else, no. What do you think, Shay?
I think that with the advancement in DNA and it being part of the court systems, the experts and professionals are trained and practiced how to be witnesses and to explain this in a manner that the jury is able to absorb.
And
I think that if I think that when they get to the point in front of a jury, some of this stuff will be flushed out, but they're right now looking for a way to break it apart. So they're going to get more and more technical here.
That's exactly what I was just about to say when I interrupted you, is that Judge Hippler is very adamant on getting all of this fought before they are in front of that jury, because he does not want to have a million times where he recesses the jury to make these types of arguments of what they're going to allow, like what if they could go in this territory, this, that. He wants it. So this is going to be very confusing and very technical and trying to push as far as they can before they are even seen in front of the jury. But I don't think it's a matter of, is the DNA reliable versus, like I said, the steps taken to get that DNA and that profile and how it led to Bryan, not that it is Bryan's.
Yeah, and I think that's the most important part is like I mean, that if the question really was that it wasn't Bryan's, like, because the defense is going to have like their own experts to be able to test it and say their expert came back with it being somebody else, then my opinion, like some of that would be worked out through this process as well. But you know, it's not unnatural that you get somebody on the stand and you have like prosecution and defense witnesses agreeing or sometimes disagreeing based on their interpretation of the reports and the evidence at hand. I think that it would be already been fleshed out if it weren't Bryan's. I think my question has been kind of like, if Bryan isn't saying the sheath is his, then like, you know, like, is he not really owning his DNA there? Like, he says there's, you know, no connection. He was by himself that night. So could he ever really say that, you know, there was other people doing this if it was just him? I mean, I just have so many questions on curiosity of how like the defense is going to attack this. And now knowing that they're bringing in Bika Barlow, being that her expertise in legal, you know, in DNA, I wonder how she's going to attack it, you know?
Yep.
I'm very, very, very curious.
Agreed.
Night, Wolfie.
Good night, Wolfie. So he asks, and I know you don't recall exactly where the knife sheath was swabbed, but we've been talking about policies. Do your policies or best practices suggest where a knife sheath or an item like that should be swabbed for DNA?
No, it would be impossible for our analytical methods to cover how to swab or where to swab every single item of evidence. We receive quite a wide variety of items into the laboratory. So it's the analyst's job as a scientist, as a practitioner in forensic biology, screening, and DNA analysis to know what they're targeting. So on this item, I believe there was also blood. So, oh, did you see that?
Yep.
This sheath, there's blood. Huh. Whose blood? Whose blood is that?
It's not just touch. Well, okay, wait. No, hold on. No, hold on. It would most likely be the victim's blood.
Uh-huh. Interesting. Okay. Hey, we said that though. We did say that.
Yep.
That there's nothing else on the sheet. They're like, there's probably blood. Okay. So on this item, I believe there was also blood. So they would have been targeting that separate and then also trying to determine who may have handled that. So they would have specifically honed in on an area that whoever handled it would have had to have touched and maybe touched repeatedly.
So on this item, I believe there was also blood. So they would have been targeting that separate and then also trying to determine who may have handled that. So they would have specifically honed in on that area that whoever handled it would have had to have touched and maybe touched repeatedly. Right, the snap. Okay.
Opening, shut. Okay. And then your turn.
And why do they hone in on those areas in particular?
Because that's the question we are trying to answer. In forensic DNA analysis, the questions we're trying to answer is, can we link assailant to victim to assailant, or one or both to the scene? So in this instance, my understanding, the sheath was found at the scene. So trying to link the possible perpetrator to the scene.
And why in particular do you hone in on the areas where this person may have handled the knife sheath?
Because looking for, so DNA is found in the cells in our body, and that includes the skin cells that are sloughed off on our hands when items are handled. So looking for any touch DNA is the term that is most often used, or from someone touching or handling an item.
So if I'm understanding correctly, the analyst is swabbing the places that would most likely have that touch DNA.
Correct.
No further questions.
The court. Redirect?
Thank you. Your Honor, I would like to start by sharing a computer screen that I have approved with the prosecutor for refreshing her memory.
It's just for refreshing. It's not an exhibit.
Yeah, it is. May I approach?
Go ahead.
Have we established she doesn't remember? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It's okay. Have we established she doesn't remember, or are we just going to stipulate it?
Your Honor, I can ask the question.
We can save time if you're going to stipulate it.
Yeah, that's totally fine, Your Honor.
Let's do that. Are you going to share the screen with the court or just her?
It's just to refresh her memory, Your Honor.
Gotcha.
So now, Miss Taylor, okay? We were talking at the end of my questions and where Mr. Nye just left off with you about where the sheath would have been swabbed. Reading the email that's been placed in front of you, does that refresh your recollection about what you believe to be the place the sheath was swabbed?
Very much so.
Where was it swabbed?
The knife was swabbed the entire... Okay, so this is, I think, the knife sheath that's supposed to be added. Yeah. The knife sheath was swabbed the entire...
Did you say the knife was swabbed? Sorry, Hibbler.
That's okay. Did you say the knife was swabbed? Sorry, the knife sheath, and I'm allowed to read it?
Ms. Taylor, you're supposed to read it and let it refresh your recollection and then not read it. But just tell me a summary of where it was.
Me too, Samantha. I have the Bill Nye song in my head now, too. Anyways, okay. The entire leather portion of the strap, both top and bottom, and then the undersides of the button. I misspoke. She did not swab the top of the button because that was determined to be the most likely place for fingerprints to be found.
The underside of the button, was it that part, that sticky part? That sticky out part would go into, or the sticky out part, or both? Jesus. The underside of the button, was it the part that the sticky out part would go into, or the sticky out part, or both? That is horrible questioning.
So, you know what? What if his fingerprint, I'm just speculation now, what if a fingerprint is actually on that button, and because, they don't have if they don't have fingerprints in the database, they could never compare that.
Yeah.
And I remember the prosecution had on their expert witness list I believe a fingerprint expert.
Mm-hmm.
This is interesting. I want to know more. Okay. Sorry. I'm over here processing this all.
No, me too.
Okay, so is it my turn?
Yep.
Okay. I can't tell from this. I would have to look at her notes.
Okay, good enough. Thank you. A couple of follow-up questions for you. You answered a lot of questions for Mr. Nye about medical information and that your lab does not do testing for medical information. Is that because you do STR or YSTR testing, not SNP testing?
Correct. Our laboratory performs both STR and YSTRs, and those don't yield medical information.
The MU that you reviewed and remembered, the Department of Justice interim policy, applied to the circumstance in this case. Do you know who else the interim policy applies to?
Based on what is stated in the interim policy, it applies to the public laboratories like ours that receive federal funding in cases where federal funding is being used.
In Mr. Kohberger's case, there was federal funding being used.
To my knowledge, I don't know if we did use federal funding in this case.
Do you recall talking to me a couple of days ago?
Yes.
And do you recall telling me that you did?
I do recall telling you that we had a grant in place, but again, I authorized payment of the invoice, but which fund the funds come out of, I don't know, and I apologize if I misspoke.
And are you aware that the FBI FIGG unit, I guess, took over and the FBI finished the genetic genealogy after Author was stopped?
I'm aware we were authorized to turn it over, but as to what happened after that, I don't know.
Okay, one more question for you. You talked to Mr. Nye a bit about not comparing the sample 95.9.1 to the sheath DNA. And I had asked you a little bit about your policy that allowed you to do the hand search, the manual search on that. Your policy does allow you to do a comparison, like it's either excluded or not excluded, though. Is that right? And I'm looking at policy 4.5.6.
No, we can report an exclusion. They aren't from the same source. But in order to say they are from the same source, considering they're from completely different areas, no, we would have to provide a statistic, and we can't do that.
But you could have looked at it and said it's not excluded.
That would be an indication that it's possible, and we would have to provide a statistic for that. And we have, so our biology section, you may be looking at our analytical methods. Biology section has their own quality manual that further discusses this.
Your Honor, if I can have her shown this document to see if we can refresh her memory.
For the record, I identify you showing her.
What I'm showing her are a couple of pages out of the biology manual for the Idaho State Police Forensics Lab that is available online. So, Miss Nowlin, if you'll look at the very bottom one, that's the one I'm having trouble squaring with your testimony, if that refreshes your recollection or helps me understand.
And yes, King Scarlett, good to see you. I agree. He's got a pretty big defense fund there going.
Mm-hmm.
Especially with Pika. No, good to see you. And guys, I'm reading as Riley Nolan, the lab manager of ISP. All right. So what this is talking about is it may be beneficial to make a qualitative statement about evidence to evidence comparisons. However, there is another section of our biology quality manual that specifically states if it's a probative comparison, a statistic must be provided. But what this is saying, so for instance, if you're in one room in a scene and there's multiple swabs that are tested, we can say these are consistent or these appear to be from the same unknown individual. Now, if I'm going to say these are from John Doe, I have to provide a statistic for each item and do a comparison of each item.
Did I hear you say you could compare if they're probative?
If it's, which that wouldn't be, in my mind, a probative comparison. We have multiple items of evidence in the same room in a scene. We can say they appear to be consistent with the same unknown individual. That's not making any statement about who that individual might be. If I'm making a statement about who might be the source of that, then that is a probative comparison, and I need to provide a statistic. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Before you make the comparison where maybe you write exclusion, you don't know if it's excluded or included, though. Is that right?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah. Yeah. Let me try and explain what I'm getting at. I'm not understanding why 95.9.1 couldn't have been manually looked at to do a manual comparison to the sheath DNA just to say excluded or not, when male E was compared to multiple items of evidence and it was excluded. But you don't know that until you do the comparison. Is that right?
Sorry. Oh, correct. So you can look at it manually, but if we're now making a probative statement, then we need to provide a statistic. And male E was also a single source, which is different than a mixture of DNA from multiple people.
All right. I don't think I have any other questions. Thank you. Maybe I can take those pages back from you. Hippler.
Thank you. You can call your next witness.
All right. So we're officially halfway through, and I think this is a perfect breaking point. I don't want to wait, though. Like, I don't know if you're around tomorrow night, but like, I kind of just want to read the rest. Like, there's so much in here.
Well, I'm looking real quick to see how long his is. I mean, yeah, I'm around. I mean, no.
Are you sure?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I can keep going. I can keep going now.
No, I can't. I have to be up like early, but
oh yeah, you could do. Tomorrow's your late night, right?
Yeah, tomorrow's my late day. But I'm totally down to just do the other half tomorrow, because I know waiting, like breaking it up too far apart, is annoying. I don't like doing that. And I'm so excited. So we are 2 witnesses down and we have 3 more to go. Matthew Gametti,
Was it
Daniel,
Janetti?
yeah, Daniel Helwig, and Leah Larkin. And so we will do the other half tomorrow. I don't get home till late tomorrow. Tomorrow's my late day, guys. So imagine like around 8:30, if that's good with you, Shay. Like probably 8:30 Eastern.
Yeah, that totally works. And then we'll need to do
And then we'll do the Frank's denial.
yeah, I'm ready to like keep going because I want to know
Yep.
it all.
Yeah, I want to know it all. Okay, wow. Oh, see, and I'm gonna have to go back and read certain pages again for like my own. Like I need to read it in my own head, if that makes sense. Because
Yeah.
there was a lot, but I'm so excited, especially with Leah Larkin, and she's the last witness. I'm so excited to see what's gonna happen.
And I will say now, after hearing Anne like walk through those questions with her, it totally makes sense why Bika is going to be stepping in. Like it
Yes.
really, really does. Because this is the prosecution's case with is on that DNA.
Yep, and I can't wait to get to Murphy, the part Murphy, which I'm not going to spoil it, but oh god, all right, good. I'm glad I don't have to wait, because like I'm anxious to see this. And again, after 8:30 Eastern will come on tomorrow to do the second half of this. But then after, for part 5, because tomorrow will be part 4. Part 5, we have the denial of the Frank's motion, the Frank's hearing. And the judge you want to explain like how you were even saying it to me earlier, why we should go in this order?
Oh, because like the IgG stuff was part of the closed hearing, and then so the judge went ahead and made his decision that was put out, and at the time they decided they were going to share the transcripts, but both the prosecution and the defense had to review for redactions. And so far what we're seeing right now was like Dylan's name has been redacted, and I'm assuming we'll probably see if they did within the court, like name any of the last names of individuals that came back on family trees, maybe, that like we're not aware of. I'm expecting like that kind of stuff would have been redacted. But I hear what's interesting is that, like, going in this order, a lot of people had this like the Frank's motion and being denied. They got to hear everything that the judge said, and then
Yeah.
they went over this, and it kind of added
It's
an extra
backward.
later.
Yeah.
It is.
Dude, I don't know how anyone's missing, like not going over line for line, because it's intense. There isn't any irrelevant pieces here. Like, yes, I understand sometimes like the beginning of giving context to a witness can be okay, like the DNA, okay, like giving us just all, but you need to know that. But this is really intense and I'm really enjoying it, and I cannot wait to read this other half.
Me too. And I also think, Melissa, like sometimes when you get into like subjects, maybe if you're not as like comfortable with going in sciences, you're not as familiar, then it's hard to digest it. But like the more you familiarize yourself, and the DNA is not going away. We know our technology is advancing faster than the court is able to like keep up with it. So we also ourselves have to be, I feel like we should educate ourselves on it, and it's just a good way to jump in, get your feet wet, and go from here.
Yep. And no, it's not gonna be here for like 15 more minutes, but I refuse to accept the fact that sorry, listen, I don't always eat cheese curds. This is like the second time I'm gonna be eating cheese curds. I love science too. And listen, for the DNA to be such a point of contention in this case, right? And I listen, I understand if you're leaning more towards not guilty, that's fine. But my point is that I hear so much about DNA was planted, it was framed, it was tampered with. Where are you now? Like, you need to go through. This is that extremely. It already has been dropped, Harley. You have to focus on this. This is where it matters. This is where it counts. But I just want everyone to be aware that they're not arguing that it's Bryan's DNA. They're not arguing that it's Bryan's DNA. So you have to also just please be aware it's Anne's job to make her client appear innocent, the same way it's the prosecution's job to make the case that he's guilty. And there's always going to be smoke and mirrors. Look over here, look over here, look over here. So you're not looking over here.
Yeah, and I agree with Moya. Yeah, they do rely on the DNA, but most importantly, you know, to have a good case, like, and that's why I say, like, if you're for justice, you want everybody to do well at their jobs, because if there's a procedure that goes wrong, then something's can be yanked out and it could be the fruit of the poisonous tree. And that's what her attempt was. And my opinion is Judge Hippler denying the Franks motion and the IDG that she was so set on really kind of took a blow to the case, or took a blow to that. In my opinion, it was just like left and right. And now, you know, we got a lot of information that Judge Hippler apparently wrote into the Franks that I don't know if we're going to just get out of this transcript, because, you know, he has the discovery evidence. Like, you know, he was even talking about some things like in open court. Like, I think he's on it, and I appreciate that. I want him to be, because if there is something wrong, like, I wasn't ever banking Dylan to be like the person that, you know, it's because she saw bushy eyebrows. I never thought that. Like, I was always looking at the technology, like, what was the time frame, what were those messages, like, did she maybe like write something to Bethany, do you hear screaming, or
No.
yeah. And so I find this cool. But yes, thank you for having me. Enjoy your curds, and I'll check you later.
Thank you. Yes, we will see you guys tomorrow for the second half of these transcript readings. Thank you so much, Shay. This has been absolutely fabulous. And I cannot wait for tomorrow so we could go through the other half. So I hope we all have an amazing rest of the night. Hit the thumbs up if you haven't, please, on your way out. And it's so lovely to see so many of the older faces that I haven't seen in a while. But yeah, I will see you guys tomorrow, and I look forward to it. So have a wonderful night.